Hello friends. Welcome to the DXD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was betrayed and reborn as the immortal vampire progenitor. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Blood of the Betrayed. The crimson sky mirrored the spreading pool beneath Issei Hyodo's broken body. He tried to speak, to question, to understand, but only a wet gurgle escaped his lips as blood filled his lungs. The sacred gear embedded in his soul, boosted gear, housing the ancient Welsh dragon Deidraig, pulsed weakly. Its emerald glow fading like the last rays of sunset. "I never expected you'd be this pathetic when it ended," Rias Grimori said, her aristocratic features twisted in disgust as she looked down at him. Her crimson hair danced in the evening breeze, the same shade as the blood seeping from his chest. "Did you honestly believe someone like you could be worthy of me?" Issei's eyes widened, the betrayal cutting deeper than the wound in his chest. Just hours earlier, they had been celebrating their victory against the Chaos Brigade. He'd fought until his body nearly gave out. Protecting everyone, protecting her. "You served your purpose." Akeno stepped forward, her usual playful demeanor replaced with cold indifference. "The sacred gear within you was valuable, but you were always replaceable." The others stood in a semicircle around him. Kiba, Kaneko, Asia, Zenobia, all wearing expressions ranging from apathy to mild disgust. Not one moved to help him. Not one objected. "Asia," he managed, blood bubbling past his lips as he reached toward the small blonde girl who had once healed even his slightest injuries with tender care. She flinched away. "I'm sorry, Issei, but Rias-sama says this is necessary." Necessary. The word echoed through his fading consciousness. His death was necessary. The extraction ritual requires your life force. Rias continued clinically. "Your sacred gear holds the power we need for our ascension, but keeping you alive would dilute its potential." Nothing personal, just ambition. Akeno's lightning danced across her fingertips. Still clinging to life. How stubborn. His vision darkened at the edges as Kaneko delivered another crushing blow to his already shattered ribs. Physical pain was nothing compared to the hollowness expanding in his chest. He had trusted them, loved them, given everything for them. "Boost," he whispered, calling on Deidraig's power with his last conscious thought. "Partner." The dragon's voice, normally thunderous, came faint and distorted. "They've binding spell. Can't finish it," Rias commanded. "The alignment won't last much longer." Kiba raised his sword with mechanical precision. "Forgive me, friend," he said without emotion, and brought the blade down. The world exploded in cardinal agony as Issei's consciousness fractured into 1,000 screaming fragments. He felt something being torn from his very soul, the sacred gear, Deidraig, his power, his purpose, ripped away like a limb. Above him, a crimson sphere pulsed with stolen power, suspended in the ritual circle the Grimori heir had prepared. As darkness claimed him, a final thought crystallized in his fading mind: "This isn't how I end." Something ancient and primal answered from the void. "This is how you begin." Death should have been the end. Instead, Issei woke to suffocation. Earth filled his mouth, his nostrils pressed against his eyelids. The weight of soil crushed down upon his chest, his limbs entombing him in absolute darkness. Panic surged through him as he realized they'd buried him alive. He tried to scream, but only succeeded in choking on more dirt. His lungs burned. No, his entire body burned, consumed by a ravenous fire coursing through his veins. The pain transcended anything he'd ever experienced. Even during the most brutal battles or transformations, something was changing him, unmaking him, reforging him. Fight, survive, ascend. The voice wasn't Deidraig's familiar rumble. It was older, darker, carrying echoes of millennia. It resonated not from outside but from within, from his blood, his bones, the spaces between heartbeats. Issei clawed at the earth, no longer concerned with the impossibility of his situation, focused only on escape. His fingernails tore away, blood mixing with soil, but new ones, harder, sharper, grew in their place. His muscles, which should have been weak from death and injury, surged with impossible strength. The earth yielded. His hand broke through to open air, then his arm, his shoulder. He pulled himself upward, earth falling away as he emerged like something primordial from the depths. The night air hit his face, carrying a symphony of scents he'd never detected before, decomposing leaves, distant water, animal trails, and something else. Something that made his newly elongated canines ache and his throat burn with unquenchable thirst. Blood, human blood, kilometers away, yet as distinct to his transformed senses as if it flowed before his eyes. Issei staggered to his feet, disoriented by the sensory overload. The forest around him appeared in perfect clarity despite the moonless night. He hear heartbeats of creatures hiding in the underbrush, count the leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. He looked down at his hands, pale as marble, yet somehow stronger than when they'd wielded boosted gear. The wound in his chest had sealed, leaving a starburst scar directly over his heart. Most disconcerting were the memories flooding his consciousness, memories that weren't his own, knowledge of powers he'd never possessed. Languages he'd never learned. What am I? He wondered, the question directed inward. You were the first, came the answer from that ancient presence within. The progenitor. Neither human nor dragon nor devil. Something new, something eternal. Issei's legs buckled, overwhelming thirst driving him to his knees. His body screamed for sustenance, for blood to complete the transformation. In the distance, he sensed a hunting party, humans tracking a wounded deer. Their heartbeats called to him like drums, promising relief from the burning agony of thirst. It would be so easy to surrender to this new instinct. To feed, to kill. No, he growled, voice unfamiliar even to himself, deeper, resonant with power. I choose what I become. With tremendous effort, he turned away from the human sense and focused on the wildlife surrounding him. A predator, a mountain lion, stalked nearby. In a blur of movement that surprised even himself, Issei intercepted the great cat mid-leap as it pounced on smaller prey. The struggle lasted seconds. The beast's claws raked ineffectively against his transformed skin before Issei's newfound instincts took over. His fangs sank into the creature's neck, hot blood flowing down his throat, quenching the inferno within. The relief was immediate but incomplete. Animal blood sustained him but didn't satisfy. A half measure, a compromise between the monster he could become and the humanity he refused to surrender. As the dead predator slipped from his grasp, Issei looked up at the star-filled sky, orienting himself. His former home, Kuo Town, lay to the east. The Grimoire stronghold where his betrayers would have retreated after the ritual was northward. Rage flared within him, a cold, patient fury unlike the hot-blooded anger of his human days. They had taken everything from him. His life, his sacred gear, his trust. They would pay, but not yet, not like this, confused, newly transformed. Understanding nothing of what he had become. Patience, he counseled himself, the word tasting strange on lips more accustomed to impulsivity. I have time now, all the time in the world. Instead of seeking immediate vengeance, Issei turned southward, toward the ancient mountains where humans rarely ventured. There, he would learn what he had become. Master it, prepare, and one day, return. Kyoto, Japan 1608. Cherry blossoms drifted like pale ghosts through the moonlight as Issei Kuromizu, the name he had adopted after shedding his human identity, watched the Real procession from the shadows of a temple roof. 2 centuries had passed since his rebirth, yet the wound of betrayal remained unhealed, a phantom pain that occasionally awakened him from his daytime rest. He had spent those centuries learning the limits of his transformed body, discovering powers no vampire legend had ever described. The ancient presence that had guided his transformation had revealed itself fully during his decades of isolation. Abaddon, the first blood, a primordial entity that had existed before humans walked the earth. Not a separate consciousness, but rather the ancestral memory of vampiric potential that had somehow recognized Issei as a worthy vessel when he hovered between life and death. Scholars would later call beings like him progenitors, the first of their kind. Capable of creating bloodlines, but there were no others like him. No ancient vampire had sired him. He was the source, patient zero for a supernatural evolution that had previously existed only as potential. Beautiful ceremony, came a whisper from the darkness beside him. Though the new emperor seems rather frail, I give him 5 years at most. Issei didn't turn. His senses had tracked the yokai's approach long before she spoke. The human bloodlines thin with each generation, Tamamo. Their obsession with purity accomplishes the opposite. The fox spirit materialized fully beside him, her 9 tails swishing with amusement. Among the supernatural community that existed alongside oblivious humanity, Issei had found occasional companions, though never true confidants. Tamamo no Mei was the closest, a kitsune whose cunning matched his own patience. "You speak of bloodlines with expertise," she said, golden eyes reflecting the distant torchlight. "How many have you created now?" "None." Her tails stilled in surprise. 2 centuries walking the night, and you've sired no children. The legends spreading among humans paint you differently, a nocturnal count with brides in every province. Human imagination exceeds their perception. Issei's crimson eyes narrowed as he spotted familiar magic signatures among the procession guards, devil magic, disguised but unmistakable to his senses. "The Grimoire family has representatives here." Tamamo followed his gaze. "Your former master's clan grows more influential each century. They've embedded Thames, elves in human power structures across 3 continents. They're not just watching the emperor," Issei observed. "They're guarding something hidden beneath the imperial carriage." Hi's enhanced vision detected a subtle distortion in reality, a concealment spell hiding an object of significant magical power. Without boosted gear, he could no longer identify sacred gears by sight alone. But his transformed senses detected something equally potent. "Curious," Tamamo murmured. "Perhaps worth investigating." For old time's sake, Issei considered. His vendetta against the Grimoire clan and their allies had evolved from hot rage to cold calculation over the centuries. He had learned that direct confrontation would achieve nothing. They had grown too politically connected, too well protected. But he had been systematically dismantling their operations from the shadows, collecting intelligence, undermining alliances, positioning himself for an eventual reckoning. Not tonight, he decided. Their magical defenses have improved since our last encounter. I'll track them back to their stronghold. Tamamo's tails flicked in disappointment. Always the long game with you, Kuromizu. 200 years of patience would drive me mad. Immortality provides perspective. He rose soundlessly to his feet. Though I admit, the waiting grows tiresome. Perhaps what you need isn't revenge but purpose. The kitsune's voice turned unusually serious. You've mastered your nature, mapped the extent of your powers. Yet you exist in stasis, neither moving forward nor finding peace with your past. Issei didn't respond immediately. The fox spirit had touched on a truth he'd been avoiding. His existence had become a holding pattern, gathering strength, knowledge, and influence while waiting for the perfect moment to strike against those who betrayed him. But what then? What purpose would drive his potentially endless existence afterward? "The world changes," he finally said. "I've watched empires rise and fall, beliefs transform, humans progress from superstition toward science. Perhaps there's value in bearing witness. A passive role for someone with your capabilities." Tamamo stood, preparing to depart. "When you decide to truly live again rather than merely exist, find me. Until then, Progenitor." She vanished in a swirl of fox fire, leaving Issei alone with his thoughts and the distant procession. The encounter left him unsettled. 2 centuries of careful preparation, of emotional distance, yet the kitsune had effortlessly identified the hollow core of his existence. Below, the Imperial guards tensed suddenly, hands moving to weapons. Issei's senses detected the reason immediately, a surge of malevolent energy approaching from the east. Something ancient and hungry, rivaling his own power. Interest piqued, he dissolved into shadow, a transportation ability he'd perfected decades ago. The shadow flowed across rooftops and down alleyways, reforming in a secluded garden where the energy signature originated. The scene before him froze his immortal blood. A ritual circle glowed with familiar arcane symbols, the same conference figuration used for his own sacred gear extraction centuries ago. At its center stood a devil he recognized despite the passing years, Akeno Himahima, unchanged by time due to her devil physiology, forming a ceremony identical to the one that had ended his human life. Her victim, a young Japanese woman with a sacred gear manifested as crystalline wings, struggled against magical restraints will. Akeno methodically prepared the extraction. 5 other devils maintained the containment barrier, preventing the woman's power from disrupting the ritual. Please, the captive begged, I've done nothing to the devil clans. I didn't even know what these wings were until last month. Akino's expression remained impassive. Your understanding is irrelevant. The power within you is required. Rage and memory crashed through Issei's careful control. Without conscious decision, he moved, faster than any devil could track, materializing within the ritual circle. One hand closed around Akino's throat while the other shattered the magical bindings holding the sacred gear wielder. Run, he commanded the young woman without looking at her, his eyes fixed on Akino's widening gaze. Recognition dawned in her purple eyes, followed by impossible disbelief. Issei, but you're dead. His voice carried the accumulated cold of centuries. Yes, I was. Thoroughly. The other devils recovered from their shock, magic circles forming around their hands. Issei assessed their power levels, mid-class devils at most, none approaching the strength he had accumulated over centuries of evolution. No match for what he had become. You will not complete this ritual, he stated, tightening his grip on Akino's throat. You will not take another sacred gear. You will return to Rias Grimori with a message. Lightning crackled around Akino's body, her signature attack, far stronger than he remembered but insignificant against his transformed nature. The electricity washed over him without effect, his vampiric immunity to magic having grown exponentially with age. Impossible, she gasped. No being can withstand. I am not just any being. Issei released her throat and stepped back, standing between her and the fleeing sacred gear user. I am the first, the progenitor, and I have not forgotten. The assembled devils attacked simultaneously, unleashing destructive magic from all directions. Issei didn't bother dodging. He allowed the magic to crash against his outstretched hand, absorbing it, redirecting it into the ground beneath them. The earth trembled with displaced energy. 2 centuries ago, I would have killed you where you stand, he told Akino, whose composed facade had completely crumbled. But death would be mercy compared to what awaits the Grimori clan. Tell your mistress. The dead accrues interest with every passing year. How did you survive? Akino demanded, backing away. The extraction was complete. We confirmed your death. Issei smiled, revealing elongated canines. Death was merely transformative. As for what I became, he gestured to the destroyed ritual circle, the cracks spreading through the stone garden. This demonstration speaks for itself. The sound of approaching footsteps, Imperial guards alerted by the magical disturbance, reached his sensitive hearing. The confrontation had drawn unwanted attention. We will meet again, he promised Akino. All of you, when you least expect it. Before she could respond, he dissolved once more into shadow, slipping between the molecules of darkness and emerging kilometers away. Atop a sacred mountain where he maintained one of many sanctuaries established across the continent. The encounter left him shaken, not from exertion but emotion. 2 centuries of careful detachment had crumbled at the sight of one of his betrayers. He had revealed himself prematurely, sacrificing strategic advantage for emotional satisfaction. Yet as he reflected on the confrontation, Issei realized something had changed within him. For the first time since his transformation, he had acted to protect another rather than advance his vendetta. The young sacred gear wielder had awakened something he thought lost, the protective instinct that had once defined him. Tomomo's words echoed in his mind. Perhaps what you need isn't revenge but purpose. Perhaps, he acknowledged to the empty night. But first, preparation. The encounter had confirmed his suspicions. The Grimori clan continued harvesting sacred gears for some greater purpose. His 2 centuries of waiting had not been in vain, but the game had changed. They now knew he lived, knew what he had become. The board was set, the pieces in motion. The waiting was over. Transylvanian Alps, Romania 1897. Your reputation precedes you, Count Kuromizu. Abraham Van Helsing circled warily, silver crucifix extended before him like a shield. Though the locals call you by many names. Issei reclined in his chair, goblet of blood-infused wine held casually between pale fingers. The human vampire hunter had gone to extraordinary lengths to track him to this remote castle, a testament to either courage or foolishness. Curious, Issei replied, since I've made efforts to avoid reputation entirely. Perhaps you've confused me with another. There is no confusion. Van Helsing's eyes narrowed behind wire-rimmed spectacles. The first vampire. The progenitor. The one who walks daylight and laughs at holy symbols. To demonstrate, Issei reached out and grasped the silver crucifix, meeting the hunter's shocked expression with amusement. Your legends have me confused with fictional counterparts, Professor. I have no aversion to religious icons, no fear of garlic, and no particular attachment to counting seeds. Van Helsing withdrew the crucifix, expression calculating. Yet you drink blood. You shun sunlight. You possess strength beyond mortal men. I consume blood by choice, not necessity. Sunlight is uncomfortable rather than fatal. And yes, my strength exceeds human limitations. Issei set down his goblet. Now that we've established what myths don't apply to me, perhaps you might explain why Europe's foremost vampire hunter has violated my hospitality with no attempt at violence. The professor's heartbeat remained steady, unusual for humans in his presence. I come seeking information, not confrontation. About the Grimoire family. Interest sparked in Issei's crimson eyes. An unusual inquiry from a vampire hunter. I hunt monsters regardless of species. Van Helsing produced a leather-bound journal from his coat. 3 sacred gear users found drained of power and life in Budapest. Ritual configurations. Identical to 6 other cases across Europe. All connected to Grimoire operations. Issei extended his hand for the journal, which Van Helsing surrendered after brief hesitation. The pages contained meticulous documentation, photographs, sketches, analytical notes, of ritual sites identical to the one he'd disrupted in Kyoto nearly 3 centuries earlier. You're well informed for a human, Issei observed, returning the journal. And unusually calm in my presence. I've faced your kind before. No, Issei corrected, you haven't. There are no others like me. Van Helsing conceded with a slight nod. Perhaps not in fundamental nature, but in power classification. I've tracked 17 distinct vampire bloodlines across 4 continents. None trace their origin to you. I've sired no vampires. Issei rose, moving to the window overlooking the mist-shrouded valley below. Those you've encountered are natural evolutions or magical creations. Parallel developments, not descendants. Yet legends insist you could create an army of the night if desired. The hunter approached cautiously. Some believe you already have hidden legions awaiting your command. Humans crave simple explanations for complex phenomena. Issei turned back to his visitor. Your real question remains unasked, Professor. Van Helsing hesitated, then committed. Will you help stop the Grimoire ritual operations? You intervened in Kyoto. Reports suggest similar interventions in Cairo, St. Petersburg, and Manila. You have some stake in opposing their work. For nearly 5 centuries, Issei had operated from shadows, systematically disrupting Grimoire operations while gathering intelligence on their ultimate goal. The pattern had become clear. They were collecting sacred gears of specific types, building toward some grand ritual. His investigation had revealed fragments, references to ascension, to breaking fundamental barriers between realms, to power beyond devil limitations. My interest in Grimoire activities is personal, Issei acknowledged. But I work alone, as do I, typically. Van Helsing adjusted his spectacles. However, practical considerations suggest a temporary alliance might benefit both parties. I have access to human intelligence networks. You have supernatural insights I lack. Issei studied the human carefully. Van Helsing's reputation was deserved. He had eliminated 3 vampire elders in Eastern Europe and disrupted numerous supernatural threats. For a human, his capabilities were exceptional. You show remarkable composure for someone proposing partnership with what you've dedicated your life to destroying, Issei observed. I destroy threats to humanity. Van Helsing's gaze remained steady. Your actions regarding Sakura D-gear rituals suggest complex motivations beyond typical vampire predation. I'm pragmatic enough to distinguish potential allies from certain enemies. The proposal was unexpected but not unwelcome. Issei's investigations had reached an impasse. The Grimoire clan had grown more cautious since his interventions, operating behind layers of proxies and misdirection. A temporary arrangement, Issei decided. Limited exchange of information regarding Grimoire ritual operations. Nothing more. Van Helsing nodded. Acceptable terms. Be warned, Professor. Issei's voice carried subtle power, a reminder of the gulf between them. Cross me, and your extensive knowledge of vampire weaknesses will prove inadequate. Understood. The hunter displayed no fear, only professional acknowledgement. Though I suspect if you intended harm, we wouldn't be conversing. The human's insight was uncomfortably accurate. Centuries of existence had tempered Issei's once volatile emotions. Viol. NCE had become a tool of last resort rather than first impulse, efficiency prioritized over satisfaction. Their unlikely alliance proved productive. Over the following months, Van Helsing's network identified 3 planned Grimoire operations targeting sacred gear users. Issei intervened in each case, extracting the targets before rituals could commence. The professor documented the ritual configurations, gradually assembling a comprehensive understanding of the Grimoire clan's magical methodology. Their final meeting occurred in London, amid the fog-shrouded docks where Van Helsing had TRA. CKED, a Grimoire lieutenant transporting ritual components. They're accelerating their timeline, the professor reported, passing a sealed envelope containing his latest findings. All evidence suggests preparations for a major operation, something beyond the individual extractions we've disrupted. Issei reviewed the documents with growing concern. These components, binding agents for multiple sacred gears, resonance amplifiers, dimensional anchors, they're building toward simultaneous activation. To what end? Something unprecedented. Issei folded the papers carefully. The scowl. Suggests they're approaching their endgame after centuries of preparation. Van Helsing's expression grew grave. Then our arrangement has reached its natural conclusion. You'll pursue your vendetta against the Grimoire clan. I'll continue protecting humanity from supernatural threats, including you, should circumstances warrant. A fair assessment. Issei extended his hand in a rare gesture of respect. Your assistance has proven valuable, Professor. A debt acknowledged. The hunter clasped his hand briefly. Perhaps monsters and men aren't always destined for opposition. Perhaps. Issei stepped back, shadows gathering around him. Though I suggest you maintain your vigilance. I remain an exception, not a revision to the rule. As he dissolved into darkness, Issei reflected on the unusual partnership. 5 centuries of solitary existence, broken by momentary alignment with a human whose lifespan would flicker and fade in what felt to him like moments. Yet the hunter had earned something few had managed, Issei's genuine respect. The information Van Helsing provided confirmed his worst suspicions. The Grimoire clan's activities were accelerating towards some catastrophic culmination. Their ritual components suggested manipulation of fundamental magical boundaries, the kind of experimentation that threatened not just individuals but reality itself. His vendetta had evolved, no longer merely personal retribution, but opposition to a threat that transcended individual grievance. The pattern revealed by Van Helsing's documentation suggested the Grimoire clan's ought not just power but transformation, ascension beyond devil limitations into something approaching divinity. If they succeeded, no corner of existence would remain beyond their reach. Not even H's carefully constructed sanctuaries across the world. The time for shadow operations and indirect opposition had passed. Direct intervention would soon become necessary. Issei Kuromizu, the vampire progenitor, would emerge fully into the light. New York City 2025. Manhattan pulsed with 8 million heartbeats, a symphony of life that washed over Issei's enhanced senses as he stood atop the skyscraper overlooking Central Park. Over a millennium had passed since his transformation, centuries spent perfecting his powers, expanding his influence, and preparing for the confrontation that had always seemed just beyond the horizon. The modern era had brought unexpected advantages. Technology had revolutionized information gathering. Financial systems provided resources without territorial control. Global transportation eliminated geographical limitations. Humanity had evolved in fascinating directions, developing sciences that approached magic in capability, creating virtual realms that paralleled supernatural dimensions, connecting themselves in global networks that mirrored mystical communions. Yet the supernatural world remained hidden from human awareness, operating in shadows cast by skyscrapers rather than castles. Devils maintained their contracts, angels their observations, fallen their interventions. The great powers had adapted to changing times while preserving ancient balances. Until now, the energy signatures are unmistakable, reported Alexei Volkov, a Russian cryptozoologist who had become one of Issei's most reliable human contacts. Multiple sacred gear activations, synchronized across 5 continents. The pattern matches the Grimoire configurations you identified. Issei reviewed the data on the tablet Alexei provided. After centuries of careful preparation, the Grimoire clan had finally launched their masterwork, a global ritual utilizing dozens of harvested sacred gears, configured to channel power toward a central nexus. The convergence point, he asked. Kuo Town, Japan. Alexei's expression reflected understanding of the location's significance. Your former home. Issei had avoided that place for a millennium. The memories too potent despite the passage of time. That the Grimoire clan would center their ultimate ritual there couldn't be coincidence, either a poetic symmetry or deliberate provocation. The temporal distortions have already begun, Alexei continued. Reports of time flowing differently in affected areas, seconds stretching into hours, days compressed into moments. Reality becoming malleable, manifestations increasing in frequency and intensity. The researcher swiped through satellite imagery showing anomalous energy readings across the globe. Boundaries between dimensions thinning, entities emerging in locations where they shouldn't exist. Issei absorbed the information with outward calm that belied his internal calculations. The Grimoire ritual had progressed further than anticipated, already affecting fundamental aspects of reality. Direct intervention could no longer be delayed. You should leave the city, he told Alexei. When the ritual reaches critical threshold, metropolitan centers will experience the most severe effects. The Russian nodded, having worked with Issei long enough to recognize when arguments would prove futile. The containment protocols we discussed. Implement immediately. Evacuate your research team to the designated safe zones. After Alexei's departure, Issei remained on the rooftop, watching darkness descend over the city. A millennium of existence had taught him patience beyond human comprehension, but even immortal patience had limits. The Grimoire ritual threatened not just his vendetta but existence itself. His phone vibrated, a secure communication from another contact. Kuromizu, he answered. It's Nakamura. The Tokyo anomalies are accelerating. Dimensional breaches reported in Shibuya, Shinjuku, and, most intensely, Kuo. Authorities are attributing effects to seismic activity, but containment of information is failing. Expected casualties. Impossible to calculate. The breaches aren't destroying, they're transforming. Reality rearranging according to some external paradigm. Exactly as he had feared. The Grimoire ritual wasn't merely channeling power. It was rewriting fundamental rules of existence. The harvested sacred gears, including his own boosted gear, taken a millennium ago, were being used to reshape reality according to some grand design. I'm inbound to Tokyo, Issei decided. Continue monitoring and maintain distance from affected zones. He ended the call and extended his awareness, connecting to the network of shadows that served as his transportation system. Distance had become largely irrelevant to him over centuries. Shadow walking allowed near instantaneous travel between locations he had previously visited. The Shadow WS responded differently tonight. Sluggish, resistant, affected by the same temporal distortions disrupting normal space-time. The journey to Japan would require additional power. Issei closed his eyes, focusing on the blood essence that defined his existence. The progenitor power flowed through him, crimson energy crackling around his form as he merged with darkness. His consciousness expanded beyond physical limitations, slipping between dimensional boundaries already weakened by the Grimoire ritual. The shadow transit took seconds rather than the usual instantaneous shift, depositing high in a small shrine outside Kuo Town, a location he had established centuries ago as an emergency arrival point, maintained through discrete proxies across generations. The Japan that greeted him bore little resemblance to the nation of his birth. Modern architecture dominated the landscape, technological marvels illuminating the night. Yet beneath contemporary appearances, he sensed the supernatural currents that had always flowed through these lands, yokai territories, shrine boundaries, ley lines of power. All distorted now, warping under the influence of the Grimoire ritual. The sky above Kuo rippled with aurora-like energies visible even to human eyes, the veil between dimensions thinning to transparency. Citizens gathered in streets, recording the phenomenon with phones, unawa of the existential threat manifesting before them. Issei moved through crowds unnoticed, a millennia-old technique of subtle influence causing humans to unconsciously avoid noticing him. His detonation lay at the center of the disturbance. Kuo Academy, once a simple high school, now the focal point of reality's unraveling. The school grounds had transformed, architecture twisted into impossible configurations. Buildings stood at angles that defied physics, walkways looped back on themselves in Mobius patterns, cherry trees blossomed with crystalline flowers that chimed like bells in non-existent wind. At the center of the courtyard, a ritual circle sprawled across hectares, intricate magical configurations etched in materials that shifted between solid, liquid, and energy states. At its heart stood familiar figures, unmoved by time thanks to devil longevity. Rias Grimori, Akano Himahima, Kiba Yuto, Kaneko Tuju, Asia Argento, Zenobia Quarta, his betrayers, conducting the culmination of a 1,000-year plan. Above them floated dozens of sacred gears extracted from their hosts across centuries, collected, preserved, arranged in precise configuration around a scent. Raw orb that pulsed with familiar energy. His energy, boosted gear, the Welsh dragon's dwelling, serving as linchpin for the entire construct. Issei paused at the boundary of the ritual circle, assessing the magical defenses. Incredibly complex, drawing power from multiple dimensions, designed specifically to prevent interruption. Breaking through directly would require more power than even he could safely channel. A lateral approach, then. He circled the perimeter, analyzing weak points, temporal fluctuations, resonance patterns. The ritual had progressed too far for simple disruptio. The energies unleashed were self-sustaining, feeding back into the system regardless of continued participation by its creators. As he completed his assessment, a voice called from behind, familiar despite a millennium of separation. "We wondered when you would finally show yourself, Issei." He turned slowly, facing Rias Grimori directly for the first time since his death. She appeared, unchanged physically, eternally youthful, crimson hair framing aristocratic features, yet power radiated from her in waves that distorted surrounding reality. A millennium of preparation, Issei observed, his voice carrying no emotion despite the significance of this confrontation. All leading to this moment. Impressive dedication to a fundamentally flawed concept. Rias smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. Flawed. We stand at the threshold of ascension. Reality itself yields to our will. And you call this flawed? Reality doesn't yield without consequence. Issei gestured Tawa, rode the distortion spreading visibly across the landscape. The boundaries you're breaking maintain existence as a coherent state. Collapse them completely, and neither you nor anything else survives the chaos that follows. Such limited thinking, expected from one who rejected true transformation. She circled him warily, maintaining distance. We're not destroying reality, we're ascending beyond it, becoming something greater than gods. The ritual's purpose clarified in Issei's understanding. Not mere power accumulation or reality manipulation, but transcendence. The Grimori clan Sao, to use the combined sacred gears to elevate themselves beyond dimensional limitations entirely. And the cost? He asked, though he already knew the answer. How many sacred gear users sacrificed? How many lives extinguished to fuel your ambition? Necessary sacrifices for evolutionary advancement. Rias dismissed the question with a wave. You would understand if you hadn't clung to outdated morality. Your transformation was merely physical, ours will be existential. Behind her, the ritual intensified, sacred gears orbiting faster around the central configuration. Reality fracture. Visibly, buildings flickering between states of existence, vegetation transforming between seasons in seconds, gravity fluctuating unpredictably. You can't stop it, she continued. The process has reached critical momentum. Even your progenitor powers are insufficient against what we've become. Issei's millennia of existence had taught him to recognize truth even from enemies. The ritual had indeed progressed beyond simple interruption. The energies unleashed were warping fundamental forces in ways that would cascade regardless of intervention. But stopping wasn't his only option. I didn't come to stop you, he said quietly. I came to redirect you. Before Rias could respond, Issei moved, faster than devil perception could track, even enhanced by ritual energies. He floored us, head through the outer defensive barriers, his progenitor nature allowing him to slip between magical frequencies rather than break them directly. Not toward the ritual center as Rias clearly expected, but toward a secondary configuration where temporal energies concentrated most intensely. The weak point in their grand design. Rias screamed orders to her companions, who responded instantly, Akino's lightning. Kiba's sword constructs, Kaniko's enhanced strength, all converging on his position. A millennium ago, such attacks would have threatened him. Now, with his fully realized powers, they merely slowed his advance. He reached the temporal nexus as reality itself seemed to ripple in protest. The others converged from all directions, unleashing everything they had, powers enhanced by proximity to the ritual center. Approaching divine levels of manifestation. Issei smiled for the first time since arriving. A millennium waiting for this moment, he told them as their attacks crashed against his defensive aura. Yet I find myself pitying you. Pity. Akino spat, lightning crackling around her form. You're about to be erased from existence itself. No. Issei placed his hand against the temporal nexus, connecting to the swirling energies within. I'm about to show you true transformation. His progenitor powers, the first blood, the original vampire essence, flowed into the nexus. Not opposing the ritual energies but harmonizing with them, altering their frequency and purpose. His millennium of existence had given him understanding of fundamental forces that the Grimoire clan, for all their power accumulation, had never achieved. The ritual configuration shuddered, sacred gears faltering in their orbits. Reality rippled outward from his position, tempo. Raw waves cascading through the distorted landscape. What have you done? Rias demanded, voice distorting as time itself fluctuated around them. Introduced entropy into your perfect system. Ssei maintained his connection to the nexus, channeling more power as the ritual energies fought his influence. Your ascension seeks to transcend dimensional boundaries without understanding their purpose. I'm simply contextualizing the consequences. The sacred gears began returning to normal orbits, their energies redirected from transcendence to restoration. The ritual Rias had spent Illenium perfecting was being systematically reconfigured, not stopped but transformed. No, she launched herself toward him, power crackling around her form like crimson lightning. 1,000 years of preparation. You can't take this from us. Issei met her charge directly, catching her assault with one hand while maintaining his connection to the temporal nexus with the other. I'm not taking anything, he told her calmly. I'm giving back what you stole. With a surge of progenitor power, he completed the reconfiguration. The ritual energies reversed direction, flowing outward rather than inward. Sacred gears shuddered, their accumulated power releasing in controlled waves rather than the catastrophic surge Rias had intended. Reality began stabilizing, buildings settling into proper physical relationships, vegetation returning to natural states, gravitational consistency reasserting across the landscape. The boundaries between dimensions thickened, separation restored between realms that were never meant to merge. The Grimoire clan and their allies collapsed as the power they had channeled drained away, returning to the natural balance they had sought to overcome. Not destroyed, Issei had ensured their survival even as he dismantled their ambitions, but reduced to their original state. As the ritual configuration dissolved completely, Issei approached Rias where she knelt, exhausted and defeated. Around them, the sacred gears they had collected over centuries drifted aimlessly, freed from the binding magic that had harnessed their power. A millennium of existence, he told her quietly, taught me something you never understood. True power isn't about ascension beyond limitations, it's about finding purpose within them. She looked up at him, hat red and incomprehension warring in her expression. We could have become gods. No, Issei shook his head, you would have become nothing. Transcendence without understanding leads to dissolution, not divinity. The freed sacred gears began dispersing, returning to the metaphysical realm where such powers dwelled between manifestations. Among them, boosted gear, the Welsh dragon's dwelling place. Extracted from him a millennium ago, pulsed with recognition as it passed near. Interesting development, former partner, came Diedrag's rumbling voice, audible only to Issei's enhanced senses. You've changed, as have you, Issei acknowledged. Will you seek a new wielder? In time, the ritual damaged my essence. Recovery first, then new possibilities. The sacred gear drifted away, joining its fellows in returning to metaphysical dormancy. With their departure, The final energies of the ritual dissipated, reality settling fully into proper configuration. Issei surveyed the Grimoire clan, defeated but alive, their millennium of work undone in moments. They would recover eventually, their devil nature ensuring physical resilience if not psychological acceptance. What now? Akeno asked, the first to regain composure. Will you kill us at last? Complete your revenge. Issei considered the question that had driven him for 1,000 years. The vendetta that had defined his existence since transformation, the retribution he had meticulously planned across centuries. No, he decided, surprising himself with the certainty of the answer. Death would be inadequate punishment for a millennium of crimes. Live with your failure instead. Live knowing you had godhood within reach and lost it forever. He turned away from them, sensing the approach of Oth. Are supernatural factions drawn by the ritual energies, angels, fallen angels, yokai representatives, even human paranormal investigators. The event had been too significant to escape notice, too disruptive to dismiss. A new era would begin from this moment, relationships between factions redefined, power balances shifted, secrets exposed. The carefully maintained separation between human and supernatural realms had been temporarily compromised, awareness spreading among those sensitive enough to perceive the disruptions. For the first time in a millennium, Issei Kuromizu faced a future undefined by vengeance. The purpose that had driven him across centuries had reached culmination, leaving new possibilities unexplored. As he walked away from the site of his greatest victory, he sensed a presence materializing beside him, familiar fox-fire announcing Tomomo's arrival after centuries of separation. Impressive work, old friend, the kitsune observed, nine tails swishing in amusement. Though I expected more bloodshed after your 1,000-year grudge, revenge completed according to original design would have merely continued the cycle. Issei glanced sideways at his longtime acquaintance. I found a more satisfying resolution. And now? Tomomo asked, genuine curiosity in her golden eyes. What occupies an immortal progenitor who has fulfilled his defining purpose? The question echoed his own thoughts. For the first time since his transformation, Issei Kuromizu stood at a crossroads without predetermined direction, the accumulated knowledge of a millennium available for purposes beyond vengeance. The world had changed during his single-minded pursuit. Humanity had evolved, supernatural balances had shifted, opportunities had emerged that didn't exist when his journey began. The ritual's disruption had created a unique moment, supernatural factions disoriented, power vacuums forming, new alliances possible. Now, he answered thoughtfully, I believe I'll try living again. As dawn approached, casting first light across a landscape returned to proper reality, the vampire progenitor contemplated possibilities beyond revenge. 1,000 years of existence had brought him to this moment, not an ending, but a beginning. Something stirred within him, not the ancient presence that had guided his transformation, but something more personal. The core of who he had been before betrayal, before transformation, before a millennium of patient vengeance. The protective instinct that had once defined him, dormant but never truly extinguished. In a world where boundaries between human and supernatural had temporarily thinned, where ancient balances faced disruption and new threats would inevitably emerge, perhaps there was place for something neither human nor devil nor traditional vampire. Something unique, something unprecedented, something like the progenitor. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Huntress of the Sacred Blade. Moonlight gleamed along the edge of Lilith Nightshade's blade as she crouched atop the abandoned cathedral's bell tower. Below, Prague's ancient streets wound like arteries through the sleeping city. Each cobblestone pathway potentially hiding her prey. Her breath condensed in the frigid February air while she methodically checked her equipment, silver-edged daggers, blessed water vials, hawthorn stakes. And the ancient sword that had been in her family for 15 generations. Executioner's Dawn, they called it. The blade had tasted the blood of over 300 vampires since its forging in 1387. Tonight, she hunted something far older. Movement at the north entrance, came her brother's voice through the encrypted earpiece. Damien was stationed 3 blocks away, monitoring thermal imaging equipment that couldn't detect vampires directly but could identify the cold spots where they disrupted ambient temperature patterns. Single target, matching the displacement pattern we recorded in Budapest. Lilith adjusted her position, midnight black tactical gear allowing her to blend with the cathedral's weathered gargoyles. Her silver eyes, a nightshade family trait that marked their supernatural bloodline, narrowed as she spotted the disturbance Damien had identified. Confirmed visual, she whispered. Proceeding to intercept, the figure moved with unnatural grace, seemingly gliding rather than walking across the cathedral grounds. Even from this distance, Lilith could sense the power radiating from the entity, ancient, controlled, far beyond the fledgling vampires she typically eliminated. This was her real quarry, not the lesser parasites she'd been dispatching across Eastern Europe for the past 3 years. The Progenitor, the first vampire, the origin point of the contagion her family had fought for centuries. According to Nightshade records, the being had emerged in Japan over a millennium ago, a singular anomaly that defied classification even among supernatural entities. Unlike other vampire progenitors who created bloodlines through direct transmission, this one existed in isolation, neither creating progeny nor establishing territories. Yet everywhere the entity appeared, death followed, not random slaughter, but targeted eliminations of supernatural beings. Sometimes devils, sometimes fallen angels, recently, prominent members of vampire covens. Her family's archives were divided on whether the progenitor was ally or enemy. Some records suggested interventions that had saved human lives. Others documented devastating G-power that could level cities if fully unleashed. The Hunter Council had finally authorized the progenitor's elimination after 3 vampire elders were destroyed in Vienna last month. The Killing GS had triggered panic among lesser vampires, leading to feeding frenzies that claimed 43 human lives. Target entering the catacombs, Damien reported. You'll lose visual in approximately 20 seconds. Lilith abandoned her observation post, dropping silently from gargoyle to buttress to ground in a controlled descent that would have shattered human bones. The Nightshade lineage wasn't entirely human, hadn't been since the first marriage to a Nephilim descendant in the 12th century. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, and extended lifespan came with their heritage, making them ideal hunters of the supernatural. She reached the cathedral's northern entrance as the heavy wooden door finished closing behind her target. Pressing her palm against the ancient wood, she sensed residual energy, cold, potent, but lacking the corruption typical of undead auras. Interesting. Lilith eased the door open, slipping into the darkness beyond. The cathedral's interior stretched cavernous and silent, moonlight filtering through stained glass to paint kaleidoscopic patterns across worn stone floors. Dust motes danced in these ethereal beams, undisturbed for decades since the building's abandonment following World War II. I'm inside, she whispered into her communications device. Switching to silent approach. Maintain perimeter monitoring. She disabled the earpiece, knowing electronic signals might alert her prey. From here, she would rely on training, instinct, and the supernatural senses inherited from her ancestors. The catacombs lay beneath the main altar, accessible through a concealed entrance few knew existed. Lilith moved toward it, each step measured to eliminate sound. Executioner's dawn hummed almost imperceptibly in its scabbard, responding to the presence of its intended prey. As she reached the altar, a voice emerged from shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to conceal anyone. The Nightshade family has certainly added their equipment since our last encounter, it observed, the tone cultured, faintly amused. Though I believe that was with your great-grandmother, during the bombing of London. Lilith froze, hand instinctively moving to her sword hilt. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, as if the shadows themselves were speaking. Sophia Nightshade, she replied, maintaining outward calm while her mind raced through tactical options. 1943, you helped her evacuate 30 children from an orphanage during the Blitz. She had remarkable courage. The shadows behind the altar condensed, forming into a man, or something wearing the perfect semblance of one. A trait that apparently runs in your bloodline, considering you're hunting me alone. Lilith's first clear view of the progenitor challenged every expectation. No pallid complexion or grotesque features. No corpse-like stillness or predatory tension. He appeared as a striking Asian man in his late 20s, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that seemed to absorb surrounding light. Only his eyes betrayed inhuman nature, crimson irises with subtle luminescence, like banked embers that could flare into infernos with provocation. Not alone, she corrected, slowly circling to maintain distance while assessing weaknesses. My brother has the building surrounded with a specialized hunter team. An exaggeration. The progenitor responded with the faintest smile. Damien Nightshade is indeed monitoring the perimeter with thermal equipment, but your backup consists of 3 novice hunters positioned at insufficient intervals to prevent my departure. A tactical error I wouldn't have expected from Nightshade training. The casual dismissal of their preparations sent ice through Lilith's veins. He had identified her brother by name, assessed their tactical positioning, and recognized the limitations of their equipment, all without apparent effort. "What are you doing in Prague?" she demanded, deciding direct confrontation might yield better results than pretending she maintained any tactical advantage. 3 vampire elders dead in Vienna last month. 2 more in Budapest. Now you're moving through Nostrum Coven territory without attempting concealment. What's your objective? The progenitor studied her with unexpected intensity, as if reassessing initial assumptions. You believe I killed the vampire elders. 5 ancient vampires destroyed within weeks of confirmed sightings of the progenitor. The evidence seems conclusive. Evidence can be misleading. He moved toward the concealed entrance to the catacombs, apparently unconcerned about turning his back to an armed hunter, particularly when deliberately arranged to be so. Lilith maintained her position, watching as he pressed his palm against the stone floor in a precise location. The hidden mechanism, known only to the cathedral's original builders and select hunters, responded instantly, ancient gears grinding as the entrance revealed itself. You know what lies beneath this cathedral, she realized aloud. I helped design the original vault in 1402, he replied matter-of-factly. The modificatio NS made during the Counter-Reformation compromised structural integrity, but the essential architecture remains functional. The casual reference to personal involvement in events 6 centuries pa. She reminded Lilith exactly what she faced. Not merely a powerful vampire, but something that had witnessed empires rise and fall, something that had walked through history while accumulating knowledge and power beyond human comprehension. As the stone slab finished sliding aside, revealing worn steps descending into darkness, he finally turned back to her. You can attempt to kill me now, or you can see what actually killed those vampire elders. Your choice, Huntress. The title, formal, almost respectful, caught her off guard. Vampires typically viewed hunters as annoyances or threats, neve. R equals deserving of professional acknowledgement. If you wanted me dead, we wouldn't be conversing, Lilith reasoned, measuring the calculated risk against potential information gain. I'll observe, for now. He nodded once, then descended the worn steps without checking whether she followed. The casual confidence wasn't arrogance but something more unsettling, the absolute certainty of Psalm. E1 who had assessed all variables and found no cause for concern. Lilith followed at measured distance, one hand remaining near Executioner's Dawn. The catacombs beneath the cathedral predated the structure itself, carved into bedrock by hands unknown for purposes lost to history. The air grew colder as they descended, carrying mineral scents and subtle traces of preservation magic. The Nostrum Coven converted these chambers into a repository during the Inquisition, the progenitor explained as they reached the bottom of the stairway. Artifacts too dangerous to destroy but too valuable to abandon were sealed here under multiple protection wards. You're remarkably well informed about vampire affairs for someone who maintains isolation from all bloodlines, Lilith observed, scanning the chamber they had entered. Centuries-old torches lined the walls, inexplicably igniting as they passed, revealing a vast circular room ringed with sealed archways. I maintain isolation from vampire politics and territory disputes, he corrected. Not from information relevant to maintaining supernatural balance. He approached the central plinth, a waist-high column of obsidian carved with symbols from a dozen ancient languages. Placing his palm against its surface, he closed his eyes momentarily as the symbols illuminated with crimson energy. The seals have been breached, he stated with grim certainty. Recently and with considerable power expenditure. Which means, someone has removed artifacts from secured containment. He gestured toward the nearest archway, where stone doors lay shattered inward, preservation magic visibly dissipated. Specifically, devices capable of extracting and transferring power between supernatural entities. Lilith approached cautiously, examining the broken containment chamber. Dust patterns suggested multiple objects had been removed, leaving distinctive outlines on stone pedestals. These artifacts, she began, professional curiosity overcoming her reservations, what exactly? A sound from deeper in the catacombs interrupted her question, something between a growl and a moan, carrying notes that made her crawl despite her extensive experience with supernatural entities. The progenitor's expression shifted subtly, crimson eyes narrowing. We're not alone. Before she could respond, he moved, stir than her enhanced vision could track, dissolving into shadow that flowed toward the source of the disturbance. Lilith followed at her maximum speed, which seemed glacial by comparison, execution. Ars dawn drawn and glowing with activated hunting magic. The passageway twisted deeper beneath the city, opening finally into a secondary chamber that had once served as a ritual space for the cathedral's secret magical operations. The floor featured an intricate circular pattern inlaid with precious metals and crystalline formations, a power amplification system designed to channel and focus supernatural energies. At its center stood what first appeared to be a vampire, humanoid, pale-skinned, predatory, but Lilith's trained senses immediately recognized crucial differences. The creature's aura pulsed with chaotic patterns, nothing like the consistent signature of true vampires. Its physical form seemed unstable, features fluctuating between different appearances as if multiple entities occupied the same space. Most telling was the behavior, mindless aggression without the calculated predation typical of vampires. The creature tore at the ritual circle with elongated claws, pitting to extract the precious materials with frenzied determination. Artificial construct, the progenitor stated, materializing beside her. Created using the stolen artifacts. Vampire essence grafted onto another supernatural being. Likely against its will. The creature's head snapped up at his voice, nostrils flaring as it identified their presence. Its eyes, milky white without pupils are irises, fixed on them with hateful recognition. Progenitor, it rasped, voice grating like broken glass. Kill, kill, kill. It launched itself forward with uncoordinated but tremendous force, covering half the chamber in a single bound. Lilith moved automatically, combat training overriding intellectual analysis as she intercepted the creature with a diagonal slash from Executioner's Dawn. The blessed blade connected solidly, opening a wound that would have severed a normal vampire's arm. Instead, the damage regenerated almost instantly, flesh knitting together with unnatural speed even for supernatural healing. Conventional weapons are ineffective, the progenitor observed unnecessarily. The construct isn't truly alive in the standard sense. Then how do we destroy it? Lilith demanded, executing a backward roll to avoid slashing claws. Rather than answering, the progenitor stepped forward, directly into the creature's path. As it reached for him with malformed hands, he simply touched 2 fingers to its forehead. The effect was immediate and devastating. The construct froze mid-attack, tremors running through its unstable form as crimson energy spread from the contact point, illuminating its internal structure like lightning through storm clouds. The creature's mouth opened in a silent scream as the energy systematically dismantled whatever magic animated it. Within seconds, the construct collapsed into component substances, blood, bone fragments, crystallized energy, and a small metallic object that clattered to the stone floor. The progenitor knelt beside the remains, examining the metal device without touching it. Blood conversion amplifier, he identified. 15th century construction, designed to accelerate vampire transfo. Machine while maintaining control links to the creator. Lilith approached cautiously, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding hunter instincts. That's what killed the vampire elders. Some kind of artificial vampire. Not precisely. He gestured toward residual energy patterns still visible in the creature's remains. The construct was created using essence extracted from the elders, combined with other supernatural components. Their deaths were a resource-gathering operation, not the end objective. Who would have the knowledge to create such abominations? Or the power to overcome multiple elders? The same entities responsible for similar operations across 3 continents. The progenitor stood, turning to face her directly. The ones systematically harvesting power from various supernatural sources while arranging evidence to implicate vampires generally and me specifically. Understanding dawned with uncomfortable clarity. You've been tracking whoever's responsible. That's why you've appeared at each location, not as perpetrator but in pursuit. He nodded once. I've followed their operations since identifying the patterns 6 months ago. They're becoming increasingly sophisticated, employing techniques that combine ancient magical principles with modern technological applications. Why frame you specifically? Misdirection. While Supernatu, Raw communities focus on the mysterious return of the progenitor, the actual perpetrators operate with minimal scrutiny. His expression revealed nothing, but Lilith sensed calculation behind the controlled exterior. Your arrival is inconvenient but potentially advantageous. The Hunter Council's involvement adds legitimacy to the deception. The implications settled uncomfortably. Her mission, parameters, track and eliminate the progenitor to prevent further vampire deaths, had been based on manipulated evidence. Someone was executing a complex strategy involving artifact theft, elder vampire elimination, and careful misdirection of Hunter resources. I need verification, Lilith stated, professional skepticism reasserting itself. Independent confirmation that you weren't responsible for the Vienna and Budapest incidents. Reasonable, he acknowledged, though your traditional verification methods may prove inadequate given the complexity of the deception. Before she could respond, a new sound reached them, multiple footsteps approaching from the entrance tunnel, moving with supernatural speed but lacking the silent precision of experienced hunters. Your backup has poor timing, the progenitor observed. And those aren't your hunter colleagues. Lilith activated her communication device, receiving only static in response. Signal jammer. Professional grade. She readied Executioner's Dawn, positioning herself with the ritual circle at her back. How many? 7 distinct energy signatures. Varied supernatural types with artificial vampire components similar to the construct we eliminated. He appeared completely unconcerned by the approaching threat, which Lilith found either impressive or delusional. They're here to complete what the first const. Ruck began, harvesting the remaining ritual components embedded in the circle. And eliminate witnesses, she added grimly. That seems probable, yes. The first attacker appeared at the Chom. Beer entrance. Humanoid but with grotesque modifications including elongated limbs and a jaw distended to accommodate multiple rows of fangs. Behind it came others, each uniquely deformed but sharing Issei milky eyes and unstable aura patterns. Lilith assessed tactical options with practiced efficiency. The chamber offered limited maneuverability, and conventional weapons had proven ineffective against the first construct. Retreat seemed equally problematic given the blocked exit. Any suggestions? She asked the progenitor, who remained motionless beside her. Several, he replied calmly. Most direct would be my handling the immediate threat while you attempt to reach the surface and contact your brother. The constructs will prioritize me once they recognize what I am. And, if I prefer not leaving unknown variables behind me. A faint smile touched his lips. Then we fight together, Huntress, and you learn whether progenitor vampires deserve their fearsome reputation. The decision crystallized as the constructs charged forward in coordinated assault. Whatever her suspicions about the progenitor, immediate survival took precedence over long-term mission parameters. Together, she confirmed, dropping into combat stance. But this changes nothing about my mission until I have verification. Understood. What followed redefined Lilith's understanding of supernatural combat. The progenitor moved like nothing she had encountered in 15 years of hunting. Neither teleporting nor simply accelerating, but somehow occupying spaces between conventional movement, as if friction, gravity, and inertia applied differently to him than to surrounding reality. While she engaged 2 constructs with precision blade work, keeping them at optimal distance while seeking vulnerabilities. He systematically dismantled the remaining 5 without apparent effort. No wasted movement, no flashy displays of power, just devastating efficiency as he touched each construct in sequence. The same crimson energy dissolving their artificial cohesion. The central mass, he called to her, voice perfectly steady despite the chaotic combat. Destroy the power core at the sternum. Lilith adjusted her attack pattern, feinting high before driving Executioner's Dawn directly into the chest cavity of the nearest construct. The blade penetrated with unexpected ease, connecting with something crystalline embedded within the creature's torso. When she channeled hunting magic through the sword, the construct convulsed violently before collapsing into component materials. The second fell moments later to the same technique, leaving the chamber silent except for the faint hum of disturbed magical energies. Lilith maintained defensive posture, adrenally. nay still flooding her system as she processed what she'd witnessed. The progenitor had eliminated 5 enhanced supernatural constructs without receiving a single injury, moving with precision that even her Nephilim-enhanced capabilities seem clumsy by comparison. They were sent to eliminate evidence, he observed, examining the remains scattered across the chamber floor. And to complete the harvesting operation. By whom? Lilith demanded, finally lowering her sword as the immediate threat passed. Who controls these constructs? Instead of answering directly, the progenitor knelt beside one of the dissolved creatures, extracting a small device from the remains. The object resembled a mechanical spider crafted from silver-white metal, no larger than a thumbnail but intricately designed. Control mechanism, he explained, displaying it on his palm. Combines magical binding with technological remote operation. The craftsmanship suggests either Grimoire or Baal clan techniques. Though deliberately obscured to prevent direct attribution, Lilith recognized the names from Hunter intelligence briefings. Devil noble houses. You're suggesting devils are harvesting vampire elders and creating these constructs. Not devils generally, but a specific faction within their hierarchy. One with particular interest in power extraction and transfer methodologies. He pocketed the control mechanism. The same faction responsible for numerous similar operations dating back centuries. A distant rumble interrupted their discussion, not natural seismic activity but directed energy impacting the cathedral structure far above them. Dust and small stone fragments rained from the ceiling as the entire catacomb system trembled. They're collapsing the access points, the progenitor stated with certainty. Standard containment protocol when operations are compromised. There are residential buildings adjacent to the cathedral, Lilith protested, already moving toward the exit tunnel. A structural collapse could kill dozens of civilians. Precisely why we should leave immediately. He overtook her effortlessly, leading the way through passages T. Had begun showing alarming signs of instability. The main stairway had already partially collapsed, enormous stone blocks blocking what had been their entrance route. Secondary exit through the ossuary, the progenitor directed. Turning down a narrow passage Lilith would have overlooked. 15th century expansion never recorded in official documentation. They moved rapidly through progressively older sections of the catacomb system, passing chambers filled with carefully arranged human remains, skulls and femurs stacked in elaborate patterns dating back centuries. The Preservatio N magic maintained these areas in pristine condition despite their age, creating an unsettling museum of mortality. Above them, successive detonations continued systematically destroying access points and support structures. The cathedral itself would likely remain standing, the explosives precisely placed to eliminate underground sections while leaving the historic facade intact. Perfect for eliminating evidence while minimizing public attention. They reached a chamber dominated by an elaborate bone chandelier, hundreds of human vertebrae assembled into a macabre lighting fixture that still glowed with faint magical illumination. The progenitor approached the far wall, pressing specific points in rapid sequence. Stone ground against stone as a previously invisible doorway appeared. This leads to the old Jewish cemetery, he explained. Constructed during periods of persecution to provide escape routes. The passage beyond was narrow and low-ceilinged, forcing both to proceed in semi-crouched positions. Unlike the main catacombs, this tunnel showed signs of water damage and neglect, suggesting it hadn't been used in decades if not centuries. The constructs and the coordinated demolition, Lilith said as they moved through the cramped space. This isn't opportunistic scavenging. They knew exactly what they wanted from the repository. Yes, the progenitor navigated with certainty despite the darkness, apparently unhindered by absence of light. The ritual circle components contain crystallized ether from the founding period of supernatural separation, a key ingredient in barrier manipulation. Quote, barrier manipulation, the metaphysical boundaries separating different planes of existence, human world, underworld, heaven realms, dimensional pockets. All maintained by complex barrier systems established during the Great War. The implications sent a chill through Lilith that had nothing to do with the catacombs, temperature. Hunter training included basic metaphysics. Enough to understand that reality as humans perceived it depended on carefully maintained separation between supernatural dimensions. You're suggesting they're attempting to breach dimensional boundaries. Not breach, he corrected. Reconfigure. The artifacts and materials they've gathered are specifically suited for controlled barrier manipulation rather than simple destruction. They reached the passage's end, a vertical shaft with ancient iron handholds embedded in the stone wall. Above, Lilith could see night sky through a narrow opening partially concealed by cemetery vegetation. "Ladies first," the progenitor offered with unexpected courtesy. She ascended quickly, emerging among weathered gravestones overgrown with ivy and winter-dormant perennials. The old Jewish cemetery stood adjacent to the cathedral grounds, separated by a stone wall that had partially collapsed in several places. From this vantage point, she could see the cathedral's Gothic spires still intact despite the systematic destruction occurring beneath them. The progenitor emerged silently beside her, somehow navigating the narrow opening without disturbing surrounding vegetation. His clothing, which should have been filthy after their catacomb expedition, appeared immaculate, as if environmental conditions simply refused to affect him. "Your brother and the hunter team have withdrawn to a defensive position 3 blocks east," he informed her, apparently sensing their locations without visual confirmation. "They're monitoring emergency channels for reports of the disturbance." Lilith activated her backup communication device, relieved to find it functional outside the signal jamming field. "Damien, confirm status." Her brother's voice came through immediately, tense with concern. "Lilith, what happened?" "We lost communication, then detected multiple explosions beneath the cathedral. Situation complex. Target engaged but not as anticipated. Rendezvous at secondary position. Code Artemis 7. Confirmed. Proceeding to secondary position." Damien paused briefly. "The target." Lilith glanced at the progenitor, who watched her with unreadable expression. "Coming with me. Prepare containment protocol Omega, but for observation only. We have complications." She ended transmission, facing the ancient vampire directly. "You could disappear now if you wished." "Why stay?" "Your verification requirements," he reminded her, "and mutual interest in identifying who's actually responsible for the vampire elder deaths. You believe I'll just take you to our safe house? An entity we've classified as Omega-level threat. I believe you're intelligent enough to recognize when mission parameters require adjustment based on new information." His calm certainty would have been infuriating if not for its logical foundation. And pragmatic enough to utilize unexpected resources when presented with existential threats. Lilith weighed options against training and instinct. Hunter protocol dictated immediate elimination attempt for Omega threats, regardless of temporary alignment of interests. But protocol assumed conventional supernatural entities. Not something unique enough to justify its own classification. "You'll submit to basic containment measures," she decided. "Blood barrier, movement restrictors, power dampening field." "The first 2, yes," he countered. "The third would prevent me from demonstrating evidence that might convince your Hunter Council of the actual threat. Counterproductive to verification goals." The negotiation itself was unprecedented. Most supernatural entities either attacked when cornered or fled when outmatched. None calmly discussed containment terms as if reviewing minor contract details. "Agreed," she conceded after brief consideration. "But any attempt to harm my team or escape containment will be met with immediate termination response." "Reasonable, if optimistic regarding your capacity to enforce such response." He gestured toward the cemetery exit. "Shall we proceed to your secondary position? The constructs, controllers will dispatch investigative teams once they confirm the cathedral demolition's completion." Lilith led the way through the cemetery, maintaining heightened awareness of both her surroundings and the ancient predator following with casual confidence. Streetlights illuminated their path as they emerged onto a quiet residential street, Prague's centuries-old buildings looming like silent witnesses to their passage. The secondary position was a converted factory building in Holsovus district, deliberately distanced from tourist areas and supernatural hotspots. Hunter operations maintained safe houses in major European cities, each equipped with containment facilities for supernatural entities requiring extended observation or interrogation. Damien awaited them at the building's service entrance, accompanied by 3 hunters in tactical gear. His expression registered profound shock at seeing Lilith accompanied by their target, though professional training prevented obvious reaction. "Situation report," he requested as they approached, hand resting casually near his weapon. "Evidence of third-party involvement in vampire elder deaths," Lilith summarized concisely. "Target claims to be tracking the actual perpetrators." Cathedral catacombs contained artifact repository that was systematically looted. Demolition charges destroyed remaining evidence. Damien's gaze shifted to the progenitor, assessing with the calculated precision characteristic of nightshade hunters. And you brought him here because verification requires controlled environment for evidence examination, she explained. And mutual threat assessment suggests temporary alignment of interests. He agreed to containment. Disbelief colored her brother's tone. I did, the progenitor confirmed, speaking directly to Damien. With reasonable modifications appropriate to the situation's urgency. Damien's hand tightened on his weapon momentarily before professional control reasserted itself. Containment level, blood barrier and movement restrictors, Lilith specified. No power dampening field. The other hunters exchanged concerned glances, but Damien simply nodded. Proceed to Containment Chamber 3. I'll notify Council leadership of situation development. They entered the converted factory through reinforced security doors, proceeding down industrial corridors retrofit. With both modern surveillance and ancient warding systems. The building's exterior suggested abandoned manufacturing space, its interior housed state-of-the-art supernatural containment and research facilities. Containment Chamber 3 occupied the building's center, a circular room 50 feet in diameter with 18-foot ceilings and no windows. Concentric circles etched into the concrete. Floor contained precisely formulated magical barriers, each designed to contain specific supernatural entity types. The blood barrier requires direct contribution from a nightshade, Lilith explained, removing her tactical gloves. It creates containment specifically keyed to your energy signature. The progenitor observed with academic interest as she pressed her palm against a crystalline E-receptor embedded in the central circle. Her blood, carrying the potent Nephilim heritage of the nightshade lineage, flowed into channels etched in the floor, illuminating the containment circle with silver-blue energy. Impressive adaptation of Babylonian binding principles, he noted, combined with Enochian boundary mathematics. Your ancestors were innovative magical engineers. Damien entered the chamber, accompanied by a senior hunter carrying specialized restraint equipment, silver alloy manacles inscribed with binding sigils, connected by a chain composed of interwoven blessed metals. Movement restrictors, he announced, offering them to the progenitor with professional detachment. Designed to prevent teleportation, dimensional shifting, or accelerated movement. The Ancient vampire accepted the restraints without protest, securing them around his own wrists with the casual manner of someone accommodating a minor inconvenience. The manacles adjusted automatically, constricting to perfect fit while activation sigils glowed briefly before settling into steady illumination. Containment established, Lilith confirmed, stepping back as the blood barrier completed its circuit. Subject secured for observation and interrogation. Protocol demanded formal language and procedure, maintaining psychological distance from supernatural entities regardless of apparent cooperation. Hunter training emphasized the deceptive nature of such beings, their capacity for manipulation, false alignment, and betrayal when advantage presented itself. Now, Damien said, crossing his arms, perhaps you might explain exactly what happened at the cathedral, and why we shouldn't immediately execute Containment Protocol Omega as originally planned. The progenitor's seat, D himself cross-legged at the containment circle's center, apparently comfortable despite the restraints and hostile environment. I believe visual demonstration would prove more convincing than verbal explanation. With your permission, I'll present evidence collected during my investigation of the vampire elder killings. Lilith exchanged glances with her brother, professional caution warring with investigative necessity. Proceed, she decided, but maintain position within the containment field. The ancient vampire nodded once, then extended his restrained hands, palms upward. Above, them materialized what initially appeared as crimson mist but rapidly organized into precise three-dimensional images, a magical projection displaying recorded events with perfect clarity. The first sequence showed Vienna, specifically the destroyed mansion where Elder Badori had been eliminated. The projection revealed details Hunter Council investigators had missed, subtle energy signatures embedded in structural damage. Microscopic mechanical components among the debris, temporal distortion patterns characteristic of specific supernatural factions. Elder Badori was targeted because bloodline specialized in barrier maintenance, the progenitor narrated as images shifted to display the vampire elder defending herself against constructs similar to those they'd encountered beneath the cathedral. Her personal library contained irreplaceable texts on dimensional boundary mechanics dating to pre-Babylonian periods. The projection shifted to Budapest, showing similar patterns at Elder Karnstein's residence. Identical construct signatures, same methodical elimination and resource extraction methodology. 5 elders eliminated, each possessing unique knowledge or artifacts related to dimensional boundaries. The progenitor continued, their deaths arranged to suggest traditional vampire territory disputes while actually serving a highly specialized acquisition strategy. Damien moved closer to the projection, professional skepticism giving way to analytical focus. These constructs, they're not standard homunculi or golems. The energy pattern suggests binding. Magic combined with technological components. Correct. The projection zoomed to display the control mechanism extracted from the cathedral construct. Devil-craft magic merged with human technology, creating remote-operated entities capable of defeating even ancient vampires through specialized adaptation. Lilith studied the projected evidence with growing concern. Her hunter training H.A.D. covered most supernatural threat categories, but these constructs represented something beyond established classification, hybrid entities combining multiple supernatural essences with technological enhancement. Who's creating these things? She demanded. You mentioned Grimoire clan techniques, but devil houses typically maintain strict separation between magical traditions and human technology. Most do. The progenitor agreed. This represents a specialized faction within devil hierarchy, one experimenting with cross-domain methodologies for specific purpose. The projection shifted again, displaying a complex magical formula annotated with symbols from multiple supernatural languages. At its center appeared a familiar configuration, the ritual circle they had seen beneath the cathedral. This is a dimensional reconfiguration formula, the ancient vampire explained, designed to selectively modify barriers between realms, creating controlled access points where none previously existed. Access points to what? Damien asked, professional composure slipping momentarily. That remains unclear. The projection dissolved, the progenitor lowering his hands. But THE components they're gathering suggest preparation for major boundary manipulation, possibly targeting the original separation barriers established after the Great War. The implications hung heavy in the containment chamber. The Great War between supernatural factions had nearly destroyed reality itself, ending only when collective effort established dimensional separation that prevented direct interactions between realms. Those barriers, maintained through complex magical systems over millennia, ensured stable reality as humans experienced it. If you've tracked these operations for months, why not approach the Hunter Council directly? Lilith challenged. Why operate in isolation until captured? Would the council have believed warnings from the progenitor vampire? He countered reasonably, or immediately dispatched elimination teams, as they did when reports of my activities emerged. Damien's expression confirmed the assessment. Council protocol classifies the progenitor as extinction-level threat. Direct approach would have triggered maximum response. Precisely. The ancient vampire's crimson eyes reflected containment barrier light like faceted rubies. My investigation required discretion, particularly given uncertain identification of the responsible faction. But you have suspicions, Lilith pressed, recognizing calculated omission in his presentation. Increasingly specific ones, yes. He studied both Nightshade hunters with analytical detachment. The control mechanisms contain trace magical signatures consistent with Grimoire clan techniques, particularly those associated with their Sacred Gear research division. Devils experimenting with sacred gear manipulation. Damien's skepticism returned. That violates multiple supernatural accords. Which means nothing if the faction involved believes the potential gain outweighs political consequences. The progenitor's expression remained neutral despite the gravity of his assertions. Historical evidence suggests certain devil factions have pursued sacred gear extraction methodologies for centuries, periodically accelerating their efforts when potential breakthroughs emerge. Lilith processed the information against Hunter intelligence archives. Devil interest in sacred gears was well documented, but systematic harvesting operations using hybrid constructs represent significant escalation beyond established patterns. Verification protocol requires independent confirmation, she stated, professional methodology reasserting itself. Council resources can investigate devil faction movements and compare against provided evidence. Time may be insufficient for standard verification procedures. The ancient vampire gestured toward the projection's former location. The acceleration pattern suggests approaching culmination point. The cathedral components were among final prerequisites for major operational phase. You're suggesting imminent large-scale barrier manipulation. Damien translated, skepticism warring with growing concern. Within weeks, possibly days. The progenitor's certainty carried weight beyond mere speculation. The pattern matches historical precedent for similar attempts, though with considerably enhanced methodology. Lilith exchanged glances with her brother, professional assessment flowing between them without need for verbalization. Both recognized the potential catastrophic implications if the progenitor's assessment proved accurate, balanced against the risk of manipulation by a potentially hostile supernatural entity. Council protocol requires 24-hour observation period before verification procedures can commence, she decided finally. You'll remain in containment while we process evidence and consult leadership. Reasonable, the ancient vampire acknowledged. Though I suggest accelerated timeline given the circumstances. We'll expedite procedures where possible, Damien conceded. But proper verification remains non-negotiable. The progenitor nodded once, settling into what appeared meditative stillness. The restraints and blood barrier, designed to contain entity's of tremendous power, seemed almost theatrical given his willing compliance, raising questions about their actual effectiveness should he decide cooperation no longer served his purposes. As Lilith prepared to exit the containment chamber, a final question demanded attention. Why? She asked simply. The ancient vampire's eyes opened, focusing on her with that unsettling crimson intensity. You'll need to be more specific. Huntress, why oppose these operations? What personal stake drives a millennium-old vampire to disrupt devil faction activities? She maintained direct eye contact despite instinctive aversion. You've existed in isolation for centuries, avoiding involvement in supernatural politics. Why intervene now? The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Supernatural entities invariably acted from self-interest, particularly ancient ones whose perspectives had evolved beyond human comprehension. Personal history, he answered finally, each word precisely measured. The faction responsible for current operations intersects with events from my past. Their methodologies remain consistent despite centuries of technological advancement. What events? Lilith pressed, sensing critical context beneath careful phrasing. Their first major attempt at barrier manipulation, the progenitor replied, something cold entering his voice despite maintained composure. The one that involved my sacred gear extraction and death as Issei Hyodo. The name triggered recognition, a footnote in obscure hunter archives, connected to the Vil clan activities in Japan approximately 1 millennium prior. Specifically, Grimoire clan operations involving experimental sacred gear extraction methodologies. Understanding dawned with uncomfortable clarity. You were human. Before becoming the progenitor, I was. Something ancient and wounded flickered behind his composed exterior. The current operations employ refined versions of same extraction techniques used to separate me from my sacred gear. The parallel is unlikely coincidental. The revelation recontextualized Hunter understanding of the progenitor's origins. Not a primordial vampire entity is commonly assumed, but transformation following traumatic sacred gear extraction, a unique evolutionary response to supernatural violation. Rest, Huntress, the ancient vampire suggested. Returning to meditative stillness. Verification procedures will require your full cognitive capacity, and recent combat has depleted your energies more than you've acknowledged. The casual assessment of her physical condition, accurate despite her efforts to conceal fatigue, served as reminder of the sensory capabilities she faced. The progenitor perceived details beyond normal supernatural range, including physiological indicators invisible to conventional observation. 24 hours, she reminded him, professional mask firmly in place despite inner turmoil the revelations had triggered. We'll return with verification team and council assessment. As the containment chamber door sealed behind her, Lilith confronted uncomfortable possibilities. If the progenitor's evidence proved accurate, the Hunter Council faced unprecedented threat requiring immediate response. If manipulated, they risked aligning with an entity whose potential danger exceeded most recorded supernatural threats. Damien joined her in the monitoring station adjacent to the containment chamber, where surveillance systems tracked every aspect of their prisoner's condition. On multiple displays, the ancient vampire remained motionless at the circle's center, apparently unconcerned by restraints or isolation. "Your assessment?" her brother asked quietly. "Evidence appy. RS legitimate based on preliminary analysis," she replied, professional training demanding objectivity despite personal uncertainty. "Construct remains from the cathedral match projection details. Control mechanism components align with documented devil craft techniques. And the progenitor himself?" Lilith considered carefully before answering. "Unlike any vampire classification in Council archives, power levels exceed standard measurement parameters without displaying typical corruption indicators. Behavioral patterns suggest strategic rather than predatory motivation. You believe his account of human origins? It explains anomalies in historical records." She examined containment monitors showing no change in the ancient vampire's meditative posture. Hunter Archives Ref. Errant's unexplained sacred gear disappearances coinciding with Grimoire clan operations in Japan during the appropriate timeframe. Damien processed this with characteristic thoroughness. If accurate, it establishes precedent for current extraction operations. The Devil faction would be repeating previously successful methodologies with technological enhancements. And targeting dimensional barriers rather than individual transformations, Lilith added, the implications growing clearer. Using accumulated sacred gears to manipulate fundamental reality structures. Council leadership will require comprehensive evidence before authorizing response protocols. Damien activated secure communication systems, preparing documentation for transmission, particularly given the source's classification status. Expedite verification team deployment, she directed, fatigue finally registering as adrenaline ebbed. Full spectrum analysis of cathedral artifacts and construct remains. Priority authorization code Armageddon potential. The classification, reserved for threats with reality-altering implications, would bypass standard bureaucratic delays, bringing immediate attention from Council leadership. If verification confirmed the progenitor's assertions, response protocols would activate globally, mobilizing Hunter resources against identified targets. As Damien coordinated verification procedures, Lilith returned her attention to containment monitors. The ancient vampire remained perfectly still, restraints glowing steadily as the blood barrier maintained its carefully calibrated containment field. Yet something about his compliance disturbed her professional assessment. An entity of his demonstrated capabilities, with millennia of accumulated knowledge and power. Submitting voluntarily to Hunter containment suggested ulterior motivation beyond simple alliance against common enemies. What game was the progenitor playing? What purpose did Hunter involve? Emmett serve in his clearly established agenda against the Devil faction responsible for his transformation. Most troubling, if his account of human origins proved accurate, what other aspects of Hunter's understanding regarding vampire evolution required reassessment? The implications extended beyond immediate tactical considerations to fundamental supernatural classification systems. Lilith Nightshade, 15th generation vampire hunter from a lineage dedicated to supernatural threat elimination, faced uncomfortable recognition that perhaps the most dangerous entity she had ever encountered. Ed might also represent their best chance against emerging existential threat. The traditional boundaries between hunter and hunted, predator and prey, ally and enemy blurred into unprecedented configuration, much like the dimensional barriers reportedly targeted by Devil faction operations. As Prog's morning light began filtering through monitoring station windows, she made professional decision that would alter Hunter operations permanently. Prepare for conditional release protocol, she instructed Damien, who looked up in shocked disbelief. Release, he echoed. Before verification completion, that violates every established conditional release with Hunter accompaniment, she clarified. Specifically, my direct supervision while verification proceeds. Time constraint. TS demand parallel processing rather than sequential operations. Understanding replaced her brother's initial shock. You're proposing field verification, tracking actual Devil operations with the progenitor while Council assesses evidence. Precisely. Lilith activated specialized equipment preparation sequences. Standard protocols assume conventional supernatural threats. This situation demands adaptive methodology. Damien considered briefly before nodding. Council leadership will require direct authorization communication. Arrange secure connection in 1 hour. Lilith Gat. Haired specialized equipment designed for extended field operations. And prepare travel documentation for immediate deployment to primary target locations. As sunrise illuminated the ancient city beyond their temporary headquarters, Hunter and Vampire prepared for unprecedented alliance against emerging threat to reality itself. Traditional enmity suspended by mutual recognition that some Urs transcended established supernatural conflict paradigms. The Progenitor had claimed personal history motivated his opposition to Devil faction operations. Lilith recognized similar motivation merging within herself, professional obligation to protect humanity from supernatural threats, regardless of unconventional methods required. In the containment chamber, the ancient vampire opened crimson eyes, the faintest smile touching his lips as he sensed preparation activities beyond the reinforced walls. As if he had anticipated this exact development from their first encounter beneath Prague's abandoned cathedral. The chess game had begun. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Shadows of the Celestial Court. The Tokyo skyline shimmered like a constellation fallen to Earth, neon signatures of humanity's technological ascension painting the night in electric blues and synthetic crimsons. 58 stories above the Shinjuku district, Kaori Tenjou stood motionless on the glass-walled observation deck. Her reflection fragmenting across the curved surfaces as she monitored the diplomatic disaster unfolding in her earpiece. Completely unacceptable came the measured fury of Lord Barakiel, his voice carrying the distinctive resonance of fallen angel aristocracy. The Grigori Conclave has maintained neutrality for 8 centuries. We will not be manipulated into military positioning based on unsubstantiated rumors. From her vantage point, Kaori could see 3 distinct supernatural territories intersecting beneath Tokyo's human facade, the golden ward boundaries of Yusaka's yokai dominion to the west, the crimson-tinged Devil Embassy complex to the north, and the obsidian spire of the fallen angel delegation rising from Shinjuku's commercial heart, invisible to mortal perception but blazing like a beacon to her hybrid senses. With respect, Lord Barakiel, she replied, formal Japanese syntax overlaying the ancient Enochian phrases required for celestial diplomatic protocol. The dimensional disturbances have been confirmed by 3 independent monitoring stations. The pattern matches historical precedent for barrier manipulation. Disturbances, yes. Intent, unproven. Barakiel's dismissal carried the weight of 12 millennia of existence. Devils have always probed boundaries. Angels have always overreacted. The Grigori position remains neutral until concrete evidence establishes deliberate destabilization. Kaori suppressed frustration beneath diplomatic composure, silver-gray eyes reflecting city lights as she formulated response. At 34, she had spent 2 decades navigating the treacherous currents between supernatural factions, her unique heritage, half fallen angel through her father, half human through her mother, positioning her as ideal intermediary for increasingly volatile diplomatic exchanges. The Virtue Dominions have already initiated defensive realignment, she countered, referencing the middle-tier angelic 4 CES responsible for dimensional boundary maintenance. Celestial intelligence suggests coordinated operations targeting critical junction points in the barrier network. Angel paranoia is hardly compelling evidence. Barakiel's tone suggested the conversation approached conclusion. Maintain observation protocols, but issue no alerts that might escalate tensions. The conclave will not be manipulated into creating the very crisis others claim to prevent. The connection terminated without formal closing, a deliberate breach of protocol indicating his displeasure. Kaori removed the enchanted earpiece, sliding it into the inner pocket of her tailored charcoal suit jacket as she processed implications of the exchange. The fallen angel hierarchy, organized under the Grigori Conclave CNCE their exodus from heaven, maintained deliberate neutrality in affairs between other supernatural factions. Their position had proven advantageous during previous conflicts, allowing strategic positioning without direct engagement. Yet the dimensional disturbances detected over the past 3 weeks suggested unprecedented threat. Systematic weakening of barriers established after the Great War had nearly destroyed reality itself. If deliberate manipulation rather than natural fluctuation, the implications transcended traditional factional politics. A subtle vibration against her wrist drew attention to her communication bracelet, platinum filigree concealing ancient technology merged with celestial craftsmanship. The incoming transmission originated from a source supposedly impossible given current circumstances. Identify, she commanded softly. The bracelet projected a small holographic identifier. Nightshade Hunter Division, Priority Alpha. Kaori's eyebrows lifted. IGHTLY, the only visible reaction she permitted herself despite genuine surprise. The Hunter Council maintained formal diplomatic relations with supernatural factions but rarely initiated direct contact with individual representatives. Priority Alpha classification suggested existential threat assessment rather than routine communication. She activated the secure channel with a precise gesture. Diplomat Tenjiao receiving. Secure transmission confirmed, came a female voice, precise and professional. This is Lilith Nightshade, Field Commander, Eastern European Division. Authentication code Thermopylae Omega 719. Kaori mentally verified the authentication against memorized protocols. Valid high-level hunter authorization, recently issued judging by the sequence markers. Authentication accepted, she confirmed. State your purpose, Commander Nightshade. Requesting immediate confidential meeting regarding dimensional barrier manipulation operations and Devil faction involvement. Specifically, evidence connecting Rimori clan activities to systemic boundary weakening across multiple junction points. The directness confirmed Priority Alpha classificati. Hunter protocol typically involved multiple layers of diplomatic insulation before specific accusations against noble houses. More concerning was the alignment with disturbances her own monitoring had detected. Your location? Kaori asked. Decision already formed. Narita International Airport, Private Terminal 6. Arriving with specialist consultant possessing critical intelligence Reg. Arding barrier manipulation methodologies. Specialist consultant. The careful phrasing suggested non-hunter involvement, unusual given the Council's typical operational isolation. Interesting. Transmission coordinates received. Kaori acknowledged, the bracelet displaying secure meeting parameters. I'll arrive within 40 minutes. Come unarmed and without surveillance equipment if you expect cooperative exchange. Understood. A brief pause. Be advised. Consultant classification may trigger diplomatic protocol alarms. His expertise regarding Rimori operations is unique and essential to preventing catastrophic barrier failure. The gendered pronoun combined with expertise specifically regarding Rimori clan operations narrowed potential identities considerably, raising intriguing possibilities. Noted. Kaori replied neutrally. Tenjiao out. She deactivated the communication channel, mind already processing tactical considerations. The hunters carefully were. Dead advisory suggested bringing a supernatural entity directly into diplomatic territory, a significant protocol violation unless extraordinary circumstances applied. Extraordinary circumstances like impending dimensional collapse. Kaori extended her awareness, connecting with the latent energy grid flowing beneath Tokyo's technological infrastructure. Supernatural factions maintained Elabora, monitoring networks throughout major cities, passive detection systems providing early warning of unauthorized incursions or power fluctuations. What she found confirmed mounting concerns, subtle disruptions in established patterns. Dimensional frequencies displaying harmonic instabilities consistent with deliberate manipulation rather than natural variation. Someone was systematically testing barrier resilience, applying precisely calibrated pressure against specific structural points. With practiced focus, she accessed secondary aspects of her hybrid nature. Fallen angel heritage man, eye fested in controlled transformation, 6 wings of gradient midnight emerging from her shoulder blades, displacing reality rather than physical clothing through dimensional folding techniques taught by her father. The wings, smaller than full-blooded fallen angels but functionally identical, vibrated briefly as they adjusted to material plane limitations. Drawing her consciousness inward, she activated transportation sigils embedded throughout her energy framework. Unlike full teleportation, which required tremendous power expenditure, the technique utilized existing dimensional currents to accelerate movement between predetermined locations. The observation deck dissolved around her as Kaori entered dimensional transit, her physical form temporarily converting to energy patterns that flowed through established channels beneath human perception. The sensation, like diving through layers of silk while maintaining perfect awareness, lasted precisely 3.7 seconds before reassembly at her private residence in Minato District. The apartment, outwardly appearing as upscale but unremarkable executive housing, contained her personal diplomatic archives and emergency equipment. Supernatural. AL security measures activated automatically as she materialized, recognizing her unique energy signature while maintaining external monitoring for unauthorized approach. Preparations for meeting UN known hunter representatives required careful consideration. Standard diplomatic attire offered limited protection against potential hostilities, while obvious defensive equipment might trigger unnecessary escalation. Balance was essential, particularly given the uncertain identity of their specialist consultant. Kaori selected equipment methodically: ceremonial tanto blade with ancestry predating recorded Japanese history. Crafted from meteoric metal by ancient fallen angel metallurgists, concealed bracers containing ward matrices capable of deflecting most supernatural energy projections. Communication equipment linked directly to Grigori emergency response systems. As she secured the tanto beneath her jacket, subtle energy fluctuations registered against her supernatural senses. Not immediate proximity, but significant power expenditure approximately 3 kilometers north, the Devil Embassy complex where representatives from various underworld factions maintained official presence in human realm. The timing seemed unlikely coincidental given the Hunter transmission. Something had accelerated operational timelines across multiple factions simultaneously, suggesting Catalyst event beyond her current intelligence assessment. 40 minutes later, Kaori's chauffeur-driven Mercedes approached Narita International Airport's private aviation section, a discrete complex. Separated from commercial terminals by extensive security measures and exclusive clientele requirements. Her diplomatic credentials provided seamless access through both human and supernatural verification protocols. Private Terminal 6 occupied the complex's northeastern corner, deliberately positioned to accommodate specialized aircraft without routine observation. As her vehicle approached the secure entrance, Kaori's supernatural senses detected unusual energy configurations within, power signatures exceeding standard Hunter parameters, contained but potent. The specialist consultant, presumably. The Mercedes stopped at the designated security checkpoint, where 2 individuals awaited beneath subdued lighting. The woman, presumably Lilith Nightshade, presented classic Hunter Lin. Each characteristics: athletic build optimized for combat efficiency, silver eyes indicating Nephilim ancestry, and the distinctive micro-expressions of someone constantly evaluating environmental threats. Her companion, however, defied immediate classification. He appeared outwardly as an unremarkable Asian man in his late 20s or early 30s, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that mirrored business executive styling. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade, Kaori's hybrid senses detected something ancient and immensely powerful, energy patterns unlike any supernatural classification in her extensive diplomatic experience. Not angel, fallen, or devil. Not yokai, elemental, or divine fragment. Something unique. As she exited the vehicle, both watched her approach with very different expressions. The Hunter maintained professional assessment, calculating threat potential and alliance value with methodical precision. Her companion observed with ancient patience, MSON eyes reflecting recognition beyond their first meeting. Diplomat Tenjiao, Lilith greeted formally, extending credentials for verification. Thank you for responding on such short notice. Commander Nightshade. Kaori accepted the identification briefly before returning it. Circumstances suggested priority response was appropriate. Her attention shifted to the unidentified companion, whose energy signature became increasingly distinctive as proximity increased. The power emanating from him remained perfectly controlled, neither leaking nor flaring despite its evident magnitude. And your specialist consultant? She inquired with deliberate neutrality. Issei Kuromizu. The man introduced himself, inclining his head with formal respect that referenced historical Japan. Say court etiquette rather than modern business convention. Though your father might recognize other designations from historical records. The implication, specific knowledge of her parentage and suggestion of historical significance predating her birth, confirmed suspicions regarding his nature. Only one entity matched the emerging profile, the vampire progenitor, classified as Omega-level soup. Our natural phenomenon by all major factions. Terminal 6 offers insufficient privacy for our discussion, Kaori decided, maintaining diplomatic composure despite the revelation. My vehicle can transport us to more appropriate facilities. Acceptable, Lilith agreed, exchanging glances with her unusual companion. Our evidence requires secure environment for proper evaluation. The return journey proceeded in professional silence, each occupant observing the others with calibrated awareness. Tokyo's midnight illumination cast rhythmic patterns through the vehicle's tinted windows, lighting the unusual alliance forming within its confines: hunter, diplomat, and ancient vampire navigating unprecedented circumstances. Kaori directed her driver toward specialized diplomatic facilities maintained in Akasaka District, a property technically classified as Grigori territory while maintaining neutrality designations recognized by all major supernatural factions. The building ARED outwardly is boutique hotel catering to foreign executives, its true nature concealed behind layers of perception filters and misdirection wards. The facility maintains comprehensive security protocols, she explained as they entered through private underground access, including dimensional isolation barriers preventing external monitoring or energy detection. Impressive construction, observed the progenitor, his crimson eyes assessing architectural elements invisible to conventional perception. 16th century foundation with modern adaptations. Barakiel's influence evident in the ward configurations. His casual identification of both the facility's age and her father's specific magical signature confirmed sophisticated perception beyond standard supernatural capabilities. The vampire progenitor's reputation for extensive knowledge appeared well-founded. They proceeded to a conference room designed specifically for sensitive diplomatic exchanges, geometric perfection creating natural acoustic isolation while enchanted furnishings neutralized supernatural energy emissions. Kaori activated additional security measures with practiced gestures, sealing the CE against all monitoring attempts regardless of origin. Now, she said, seating herself at the conference table's head position as diplomatic protocol dictated, perhaps you might explain why Under Council Field Commander has partnered with the vampire progenitor to request emergency meeting with a fallen angel diplomat. Lilith placed a small device at the table's center, obsidian sphere. Approximately 4 centimeters in diameter, etched with precision sigils from multiple supernatural languages. With specific activation gesture, the sphere projected 3-dimensional images into surrounding space. Detailed recordings of magical operations occurring at various global locations. Evidence of coordinated barrier manipulation operations, the hunter explained professionally. 17 incidents across 9 countries, each targeting specific junction points in the dimensional boundary network established after the Great War. The projection displayed systematic magical operations employing methodologies Kaori recognized from classified Grigori archives. Specialized rituals designed to influence fundamental reality structures rather than merely access alternate dimensions. The precision and scale suggested resources beyond conventional supernatural operations. Devil Clan involvement is confirmed through multiple artifacts recovered from operation sites, Lilith continued. The projection shifting to display recovered components and energy signature analyses. Specifically, Grimoire Clan magical configurations consistent with their Sacred Gear Research Division. The operations employ hybrid constructs combining devil craft with technological enhancements, added the progenitor, his voice carrying the measured cadence of centuries. Similar to methodologies employed during previous barrier manipulation attempts dating back approximately 1 millennium. The evidence presented confirmed Kaori's worst suspicions regarding dimensional disturbances detected by Grigori monitoring stations. Not isolated incidents but coordinated campaign targeting specific structural vulnerabilities in reality's fundamental architecture. Why approach fallen angel diplomatic channels rather than angel representatives? She asked, professional skepticism requiring thorough assessment. The Virtue Dominions hold primary responsibility for barrier maintenance. The Virtues have already detected the disruptions but misidentified the source, Lilith explained. Their response protocols target general devil activities rather than specific faction operations. Without precise intervention, their defensive measures may trigger the very conflict the manipulators seek to create. Understanding crystallized with uncomfortable clarity. You believe these operations are designed to provoke direct confrontation between major factions. To restart the Great War. The methodologies suggest deliberate escalation toward conflict threshold, confirmed the progenitor. Barrier weakening at specific junction points creates appearance of territorial aggression while concealing the actual manipulation. Angels blame devils. Devils perceive angel overreaction. Fallen maintain neutrality. Perfect conditions for orchestrated confrontation. Kaori processed the assessment against her extensive diplomatic experience. The scenario aligned disturbingly well with mounting tensions she'd observed across faction interactions, increasing suspicion, diplomatic communication deterioration, military positioning disguised as routine realignment. Lord Bara. Heel dismissed similar concerns during this evening's briefing, she admitted, diplomatic caution balanced against emerging existential threat. The Grigori Conclave maintains neutrality positions regardless of escalation between other factions. Precisely as anticipated by those orchestrating the manipulation, noted the progenitor with the calm certainty of someone who had witnessed similar patterns across centuries. Fallen angel neutrality creates strategic advantage for whoever controls the conflict's initialization parameters. The projection shifted again, displaying complex magi. Cal formulas annotated with symbols familiar from Kaori's diplomatic archive access, ancient configuration sequences related to dimensional boundary establishment during reality stabilization following the Great War. These were recovered from operation sites in Prague, Vienna, and Cairo, Lilith explained, highlighting specific components. Theoretical framework for controlled barrier manipulate. Ion allowing selective access between previously isolated dimensions. Not merely weakening existing boundaries, Kaori realized, diplomatic training yielding to supernatural physics understanding. But creating specialized transit corridors bypassing established checkpoints. Correct. The progenitor indicated specific formula segments. The configuration allows directed barrier penetrati. On without generalized collapse, precision instruments rather than demolition charges. The implications extended beyond immediate crisis to fundamental supernatural balance. Established dimensional boundaries prevented direct warfare between realms, requiring energy-intensive travel protocols that limited large-scale military operations. Selective barrier manipulation would enable unprecedented force projection capabilities. Why would a Grimoire faction pursue such methodology? Kaori questioned, diplomatic instincts seeking motivation beyond apparent tactical objectives. The Devil Aris. Tocracy benefits from current stability structures. War would threaten their accumulated power bases. The progenitor and hunter exchanged glances, in spoken communication suggesting information beyond the presented evidence. After momentary consideration, Lilith nodded slightly, yielding explanation priority to her unusual ally. The faction responsible seeks power transcending conventional supernatural limitations, he stated. Each word precisely measured. Their methodology involves sacred gear extraction and energy accumulation toward transformation objectives rather than merely military advantage. Transformation into what? Kaori pressed, sensing critical context beneath careful phrasing. Godhood, the progenitor answered simply. Or their perception of it. Dimensional B. Barrier manipulation represents means rather than objective, creating conditions allowing unprecedented power accumulation while supernatural factions exhaust themselves in renewed conflict. The Urshan would have seemed delusional from most sources. From the vampire progenitor, an entity whose existence already defied conventional supernatural classification, it carried disturbing plausibility. You have history with this faction, Kaori observed, diplomatic training identifying subtle indicators beneath his controlled presentation. Personal involvement beyond current intervention. Crimson eyes met her silver-gray assessment directly. I was their first successful sacred gear extraction subject, approximately 1 millennium ago. My transformation into current form was unanticipated consequence of their experimental procedures. The revelation clarified several historical anomalies in Grigori archives, references to unique vampire emergence following Grimoire clan's sacred Heia. Our extraction operations in Japan during the appropriate timeframe. Not natural evolution but supernatural adaptation to catastrophic power removal. You were human, she realized, pieces connecting. Across diplomatic intelligence fragments. Before becoming the progenitor, I was Issei Hyodo, he confirmed without emotional inflection despite the evident significance. My sacred gear, boost. Gear containing the Welsh dragon Dedrag, was extracted through ritual methodology similar to current operations. My transformation occurred during subsequent death and resurrection cycle. Lilith continued the explanation, her professional demeanor softening slightly. The Hunter Council has verified historical records confirming this account. Grimoire clan archives from the period reference E. Experimental sacred gear extraction resulting in unanticipated transformation of subject vessel, followed by containment failure and specimen escape. Clinical terminology for murder and unexpected survival, Kaori translated. Diplomatic experience with supernatural euphemisms extensive. And now the same faction pursues similar methodologies with enhanced technological integration. On significantly larger scale, the Progenitor confirmed. The current operations harvest specific sacred gear types related to dimensional manipulation, accumulating power toward barrier reconfiguration objectives. The evidence presented aligned with disturbing precision to dimensional disturbances Kaori had monitored independently. Not coincidental fluctuations but orchestrated campaign toward specific transformative outcome, using faction conflict as convenient distraction while pursuing transcendent objectives. Decision crystallized with professional certainty. Regardless of Grigori Conclave's official neutrality position, the presented threat transcended conventional diplomatic parameters. Response protocols required immediate implementation regardless of political consequences. I'll need to verify key evidence components through independent channels before presenting formal assessment to Lord Barakil, she stated, diplomatic caution balanced against recognition of existential threat. The conclave requires definitive proof of deliberate manipulation before abandoning neutrality positions. Verification opportunities exist approximately 3 kilometers north, the Progenitor observed casually. Crimson eyes shifting toward the Devil Embassy complex's direction. Current magical signature patterns suggest active operation in progress. Kaori extended her supernatural senses, confirming his assessment with growing alarm. Energy fluctuations she had detected earlier had intensified significantly, precise magical configurations consistent with barrier manipulation methodology displayed in the Hunter's evidence projection. The Devil Embassy complex, she confirmed, diplomatic composure momentarily yielding to genuine concern. Specifically the Grimoire clan's private research annex. Energy signatures match the presented operation patterns. Convenient timing, Lilith noted with professional suspicion. Almost as if they anticipated our meeting. Are they maintaining predetermined operational schedule regardless of potential discovery, the Progenitor suggested, rising from his seated position with fluid grace. The pattern suggests acceleration toward culmination point, with each component operation proceeding according to calculated timeline. Kaori activated her communication bracelet, accessing Grigori monitoring systems maintaining secure conference room isolation. Dimensional distortion increasing at coordinates matching Devil Embassy research facilities. Signature patterns consistent with junction point manipulation rather than standard transit operations. Diplomatic protocols dictated formal notification through established channels before direct investigation of activities within recognized faction territory. Such procedures typically required hours if not days of bureaucratic navigation before authorization. Hours they clearly didn't have. My diplomatic credentials provide access to the embassy complex's public sections. Kaori decided, protocol considerations yielding to practical necessity. Sufficient proximity for detailed energy analysis without triggering territorial violation responses. They'll have detection systems monitoring for Hunter energy signatures, Lilith pointed out, practical operational assessment replacing diplomatic considerations. My presence would trigger immediate security protocols. And mine would initiate general evacuation procedures given historical precedent, added the Progenitor with faint amusement. Though perhaps that might prove tactically advantageous under certain circumstances. Kaori considered options against diplomatic experience and supernatural threat assessment. Standard protocols seemed inadequate given the evidence, suggesting imminent barrier manipulation with potentially catastrophic consequences. Verification requires direct observation rather than remote monitoring, she concluded. My diplomatic credentials combined with Fallen Angel heritage provide optimal cover for initial investigation. You'll remain at secondary position with communication link established through secured channels. Lilith prepared ready to object to division of operational forces, but the Progenitor placed restraining hand on her arm, the gesture conveying centuries of tactical assessment in silent communication. Dip. Lemmatic approach offers highest probability for information gathering without premature confrontation, he agreed. We'll maintain secure position with extraction capabilities should circumstances deteriorate. The hunter reluctantly nodded. Acceptable tactical compromise, provided continuous communication link remains established. First sign of operational escalation triggers immediate intervention. Tian regardless of diplomatic consequences. Agreement reached, they proceeded to implementation planning with practiced efficiency. Kaori provided detailed embassy complex schematics accessed through diplomatic archives, identifying optimal approach vectors and security system parameters. The research annex occupies sublevels 3 through 7, she explained, holographic projection disc. Laying internal architecture invisible to conventional perception. Dimensional manipulation operations would require specialized containment facilities located on sublevel 6, based on energy signature characteristics. Access points. Lilith inquired, Hunter assessment focusing on tactical considerations rather than diplomatic protocols. Primary elevator systems require aristocratic devil authentication, Kaori replied, indicating specific locations on the projection. Secondary maintenance access ways connect environmental control systems between levels, designed for emergency operations during primary system failure. The progenitor studied the projected schematics with analytical precision. The central atrium provides direct vertical access through all sublevels, he observed, indicating architectural feature designed for supernatural transit rather than human movement patterns. Inactive during standard operations but structurally accessible through specific junction points. His casual identification of architectural vulnerabilities invisible even to diplomatic intelligence suggested personal familiarity with devil construction methodologies, knowledge accumula. TED through centuries of observation rather than formal documentation access. The atrium transit system activates only during official aristocratic visitation, Kaori confirmed. However, maintain a NCE access ways intersect atrium structure at sublevel transition points, providing potential emergency access should primary approach fail. Operational planning proceeded with methodical thoroughness. Contingency scenarios established for various potential complications. Communication protocols, emergency extraction procedures, evidence documentation methodologies, each element addressed with complementary expertise from diplomatic, hunter, and progenitor perspectives. 20 minutes later, Kaori's diplomatic vehicle approached the Devil Embassy complex, a magnificent modern structure combining glass, steel, and stone in architectural harmony that concealed its supernatural functions beneath corporate aesthetics. To human perception, the building housed international financial operations, to supernatural awareness, it represented Devil aristocracy's official presence in human realm. Approaching primary security checkpoint, she informed her companions through secured communication link. Diplomatic identification protocols initiating. The vehicle passed through layered security measures combining mundane technology with supernatural verification systems. Kaori presente. D. Appropriate credentials. Her fallen angel diplomatic authorization recognized under supernatural accords governing faction interactions in neutral territories. Diplomat Tenjiao greeted the Devil's security administrator. His perfectly tailored appearance concealing middle-tier power classification. Unexpected visit at this hour. How may the embassy assist Grigori representation? Urgent C. Communication for Grigori clan diplomatic attaché, she replied smoothly, fabrication built upon established diplomatic protocols. Dimensional disturbances detected near shared territorial boundaries. Require immediate consultation before formal notification procedures. The administrator's expression revealed nothing, though subtle energy fluctuations suggested communication with superior authority through telepathic channels common among Devil bureaucratic structures. Lord Zeoticus is currently unavailable, he finally responded, referring to the Grigori clan's senior diplomatic representative. However, I can arrange meeting with junior attaché to receive your communication. Acceptable, Kaori agreed, maintaining professional diplomatic demeanor despite recognizing the deliberate obstruction technique. The matter concerns technical specifications rather than policy positions. Junior representation is appropriate for initial consultation. The administrator directed our vehicle toward guest diplomatic parking rather than restricted access areas, standard procedure for unscheduled visitations. As they proceeded, Kaori's supernatural senses detected increasing magical Activity from the building's lower levels, energy signatures matching the barrier manipulation operations documented in Hunter evidence. Security checkpoint cleared, she reported through concealed communication device. Dimensional activity increasing in sublevel 6, consistent with junction point manipulation. Signature pattern suggests approximately 30-minute window before operation reaches critical threshold. Understood, came Lilith's professional response. Maintaining secondary position with intervention capability. Continuous monitoring established through secured channels. The vehicle stopped at designated diplomatic parking, where another Devil representative awaited. Female, approximately equivalent to human mid-20s in appearance, wearing formal business attire that complemented crimson hair characteristic of Grimoire bloodline. Diplomat Tenjiao, she greeted with practiced cordiality. I'm Liana Grimoire, junior diplomatic attaché. I understand you have urgent communication regarding dimensional boundaries. Correct. Kaori matched the formal diplomatic tone while assessing her assigned representative. Junior attaché position suggested limit. Authority but potential access to relevant facilities depending on specific bloodline proximity to clan leadership. Grigori monitoring stations detected harmonic fluctuations along shared territorial boundaries. Protocol suggests direct consultation before formal notification procedures. Of course, Liana led her toward the embassy's main entrance with professional courtesy that concealed calculated assessment. Though unusual timing for diplomatic engagement, our technical specialists typically maintain standard business hours. Dimensional physics rarely respect administrative schedules. Kaori replied with diplomatic humor that masked growing concern regarding energy fluctuations beneath their position. The disturbance patterns suggested time-sensitive characteristics requiring immediate attention. They proceeded through the embassy's public sections, opulent reception areas, conference facilities, and administrative offices maintaining appropriate supernatural fact. Qian aesthetic while accommodating human visitors unaware of their true nature. Beneath this ordinary diplomatic facade, Kaori's senses detected increasing magical activity from lower levels, precision. Energy configurations focused toward specific dimensional coordinates. The technical consultation office is this way, Liana indicated, directing them toward East Wing facilities rather than Sen. Tral access points that would provide more direct route to research sublevels. Deliberate misdirection, though diplomatically appropriate given in scheduled visitation protocols. Kaori followed without objection, mapping potential alternative access routes against architectural schematics memorized during planning session. The fluctuation patterns suggest harmonic resonance with specific dimensional frequencies, she elaborated. Maintaining technical diplomatic conversation while gathering environmental intelligence. Particularly concerning given historical precedent regarding boundary stability requirements. I'm sure our specialists will provide appropriate assessment. Liana responded with professional neutrality that revealed nothing about her actual knowledge regarding ongoing operations. Though I should note that registered activities within Sovereign Devil territory fall outside consultation requirements under current accords. The carefully worded reference to territorial sovereignty confirms suspicions regarding deliberate obstruction. Standard diplomatic deflection techniques designed to prevent external observation of classified operations, precisely as expected given the evidence suggesting unauthorized barrier manipulation. Of course, Kaori acknowledged with appropriate diplomatic recognition. The Grigori Conclave respects established territorial boundaries. Our concern involves potential harmonic propagation beyond designated sovereignty zones, thus the courtesy notification rather than formal inquiry. As they approached the technical consultation offices, deliberately distanced from actual research facilities, Kaori detected critical acceleration in sublevel energy configurations. The manipulation operation had entered advanced implementation phase. Dimensional frequencies shifting toward calculated convergence pattern. Situation update, she sub-vocalized through concealed communication device. Operation approaching critic. AL threshold approximately 15 minutes ahead of projected timeline. Technical consultation diversion in progress as anticipated. Understood, came Lilith's response. Alternative access options. Kaori assessed their position against memorized schematics, identifying structural junction point where maintenance systems interfaced with primary environmental controls. Diplomatic extraction required, she decided, recognizing opportunity constraints against operational objectives. Maintenance junction point accessible through Eastern Service Corridor, Sublevel 1. Proceeding to extraction position. Confirmed the Hunter. Standby for transition protocol. Kaori redirected attention to her devil escort, who had paused before impressive mahogany doors marking technical consultation department entrance. Our dimensional specialists are being notified of your arrival, Lyanna informed her with professional courtesy. Though comprehensive assessment may require formal request through standard diplomatic channels given the technical complexity involved. Standard delaying tactics, diplomatically appropriate while allowing restricted operations to proceed without external observation. Kaori prepared response consistent with diplomatic protocols while calculating optimal timing for extraction transition. The decision became unnecessary as reality itself trembled. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible to conventional senses, then increasingly pronounced as dimensional frequencies beneath the embassy shifted beyond stability parameters. The air itself seemed to vibrate with harmonic distortion, light bending around focal points as spatial integrity fluctuated under manipulation pressure. Lyanna's expression shifted from diplomatic composure to genuine alarm, confirming she hadn't been informed about operation magnitude. "What's happening?" she demanded, professional facade cracking as reality distortions intensified. "Barrier manipulation operation," Kaori answered directly. Diplomatic pretense abandoned as situation deteriorated. Sublevel 6. Junction point targeted for selective permeability modification. The devil representative's shock appeared genuine. "That's impossible. Such operations require Archduke authorization and multilateral notification under faction accords. Evidently someone neglected protocol requirements." Kaori observed as architectural elements around them began displaying stress fractures, reality itself protesting against unauthorized manipulation. Embassy security systems activated automatically. Magical barriers establishing containment parameters around affected areas while communication networks broadcast evacuation protocols. Personnel appeared in corridors, confusion evident as EY responded to emergency procedures without understanding the underlying cause. "We need to evacuate immediately," Lyanna insisted, professional training reasserting itself despite evident confusion. "Emergency protocols would leave dozens dead when the junction point collapses," Kaori interrupted, diplomatic caution yielding to practical necessity. "The operation requires immediate eruption before critical threshold achievement." Decision crystallized with professional certainty. Diplomatic consequences became secondary to preventing catastrophic barrier failure. Kaori accessed her hybrid heritage. Fallen angel aspects manifesting through controlled transformation. 6 wings of gradient midnight emerging as she channeled celestial energy through optimized pathways. Lyanna stumbled backward, genuine shock replacing diplomatic composure. "You're channeling combat manifestation on sovereign devil territory. The violation protocols are considerably less concerning than imminent dimensional collapse," Kaori completed, focusing energy through specialized configurations taught during Grigori combat training. "Recommend immediate evacuation coordination for Embus. Y personnel while I attempt operation interruption." Without waiting for response, she directed concentrated energy burst toward the floor beneath them, precisely calculated force creating access into maintenance systems rather than general structural damage. The controlled explosion revealed environmental control conduits connecting upper levels with research sublevels, exactly as architectural schematics had indicated. "Extraction point established," she reported through communication link while expanding her energy signature to maximize detection probability. Proceeding to sublevel access junction. Operation approaching critical threshold with accelerated timeline. "Confirmed," came Lilith's response, professional calm despite evident situation escalation. "Intervention team approaching your position. Maintain communication link during descent." Kaori entered the maintenance conduit, fallen angel wings folding against her body as she navigated restricted spaces never designed for physical transit. Her hybrid physiology provided advantages beyond pure supernatural forms, adapting to environmental conditions while maintaining optimal energy efficiency. As she descended through mechanical infrastructure toward sublevel junction points, embassy security systems finally processed her unauthorized access, alarms activating throughout the complex as supernatural detection networks identified combat manifest fallen angel presence within sovereign territory. The diplomatic consequences would be significant. Potential career termination, certainly, possibly X. Tending to formal censure from Grigori leadership. Such considerations seemed increasingly irrelevant as dimensional distortions intensified around her, reality itself protesting against fundamental manipulation. She reached Sublevel 3 Transition Junction, mechanical systems interfacing with arcane infrastructure designed specifically for Devil aristocracy research operations. Beyond the maintenance barrier, she detected specialized containment chambers housing equipment consistent with barrier manipulation methodologies identified in Hunter evidence. Most concerning was the Energy configuration at Operation Center, precision magical matrices focusing dimensional frequencies toward specific barrier junction point, systematically altering permeability parameters to create controlled access corridor between previously isolated realms. Visual confirmation of barrier manipulation operation, she reported, observing through maintenance access point. Specialized equipment matching evidence profiles. Magical configuration consistent with selective permeability modification targeting specific dimensional coordinates. The operation occupied circular chamber approximately 30 meters in diameter, dominated by central device resembling astronomical orrery constructed from arcane materials rather than conventional elements. Multiple Devil researchers in specialized protective clothing monitored equipment stations surrounding the central apparatus, their movements displaying increasing urgency as dimensional frequencies approached convergence threshold. Personnel count. Came Lilith's query through communication link. 17 visible technicians, 4 security class devils maintaining protective barrier, 2 authority figures directing operation, Kaori assessed. Diplomatic training providing precise categorization despite limited observation time. Central apparatus approaching critical rotation velocity according to monitoring equipment indicators. Understood. Maintain position. Something in the Hunter's tone suggested imminent development beyond standard tactical adjustment. Kaori's suspicion proved accurate as reality itself seemed to shudder around the operation chamber. Not from the barrier manipulation procedure but from entirely different energy source manifesting directly within the secured environment. Shadows throughout the chamber suddenly deepened, pooling with impossible density before coalescing into humanoid form at the precise center of the manipulation apparatus. The vampire progenitor materialized directly within the most heavily warded section of Devil's sovereign territory, crimson eyes surveying the operation with ancient calm that contrasted sharply with the technicians' panicked reactions. I recommend immediate deactivation. He addressed the assembled devils with conversational politeness that somehow projected throughout the chamber despite moderate volume. The frequency harmonics you've established are propagating beyond calculated containment parameters. The security class devils recovered from initial shock with professional efficiency, magical circles forming around their hands as they prepared combat response. The authority figures, distinguished by elaborate formal attire rather than technical uniforms, displayed very different reactions, one genuine shock, the other cold fury. Progenitor. Spat the furious aristocrat, a middle-aged appearing devil with classic Grimoire crimson hair and aristocratic features. Your interference grows tiresome across centuries. Secure it. Why Containment Protocol 7 immediately. The 4 security devils responded with coordinated attack, specialized binding magic designed specifically for vampire entity containment launching from precisely arranged positions. The magical configuration suggested preparation for this specific encounter, defensive protocols established in anticipation of potential progenitor intervention. Their preparation proved inadequate. The ancient vampire didn't avoid the magical assault, he simply allowed it to connect with his physical form, the specialized binding energy dissipating harmlessly up on contact like water against heated stone. His expression remained entirely unchanged as he assessed the central apparatus with academic interest. Fascinating adaptation of classical manipulation methodology. He observed conversationally, apparently unconcerned by continued magical attacks from increasingly desperate security personnel. The harmonic induction through crystalline medium shows considerable improvement over previous iterations. Unfortunately, your calculation model neglects cascade resonance in secondary boundary structures. While security forces focused on the impossibly calm vampire, Lilith Nightshade entered through separate access point, maintenance junction opposite Kaori's observation position. The Hunter moved with supernatural precision, neutralizing paramet monitoring systems before security personnel realized additional infiltration had occurred. Ambassador interference as well, the aristocrat demanded, recognizing Kaori's energy signature despite her concealed position. The diplomatic consequences are substantially less concerning than catastrophic barrier collapse, the progenitor completed pleasantly. Which will occur in approximately 73 seconds unless the apparatus is deactivated. The frequency harmonics have established self-sustaining propagation pattern extending beyond your containment parameters. As if confirming his assessment, reality around the central apparatus began visibly distorting, light bending in impossible angles, spatial dimensions fluctuating between stability states as barrier manipulation exceeded design specifications. Warning indicators activated across monitoring stations, technicians' expressions shifting from controlled professional focus to genuine alarm. Lord Faustus, the harmonic propagation is exceeding containment capabilities, reported one technician. Monitoring equipment displays flashing critical warning indicators. Boundary integrity dropping below minimum stability threshold. The aristocrat, Lord Faustus, evidently, maintained remarkable composure despite escalating crisis. Activate emergency stabilization protocol. Security team, eliminate intruders regardless of classification status. The security devils abandoned their ineffective attacks against the progenitor, redirecting toward more conventional targets. Chu focused on Lilith's position W. While the others attempted to locate Kaori's observation point, supernatural senses following her energy signature toward maintenance access junction. Diplomatic restraint became tactically untenable. Kaori channeled fallen angel heritage through optimized combat configurations, focusing celestial energy through specialized pathways as she emerged from concealment. 6 wings extended to full man. IFE station as she launched precisely calculated counterattack against approaching security devils. Barrier collapse imminent, she announced through communication link while engaging nearest opponent with concentrated energy projection. Operation shutdown required immediately regardless of diplomatic consequences. The progenitor nodded almost imperceptibly, acknowledging tactical assess me. NT while maintaining position beside central apparatus. As security forces engaged both Kaori and Lilith in combat designed to prevent interference, he simply placed one hand against the device's primary control mechanism. Crimson energy, unlike anything in conventional supernatural classification, flowed from his palm into the apparatus, systematically interrupting established harmonic patterns. The manipulation configuration destabilized under his precise intervention, power flows redirecting from barrier junction target toward controlled dissipation pathways. Fascinating design adaptation, he commented to the increasingly frantic technicians attempting to counter his interference. Though fundamental conceptual flaws remain consistent across centuries, extraction methodologies inevitably prioritize power accumulation over stability maintenance. Lord Faustus abandoned pretense of controlled authority, genuine rage replacing aristocratic composure. You understand nothing of our work. The ascension parameters require precisely calculated dimensional frequency adjustments establishing controlled transit corridors between previously isolated realms, the progenitor completed. Continuing systematic neutralization of the apparatus functions, allowing specialized extraction operations across multiple domains simultaneously. Methodology unchanged since previous attempts, merely enhanced through technological integration. While this exchange occurred, Kaori engaged security forces with controlled efficiency, her hybrid combat style combining fallen angel energy. Y projection with human martial applications optimized for close-quarter supernatural confrontation. Lilith demonstrated equally impressive capabilities from opposite position, her hunter lineage evid. And in precise neutralization techniques specifically designed for devil entity engagement. The diplomatic violations will be addressed at highest levels, threatened the second aristocrat, D remained silent during initial confrontation. Fallen angel combat manifestation on sovereign devil territory constitutes act of war under faction accords. As does unauthorized barrier manipula. Qian targeting dimensional junction points, Kaori countered, neutralizing final security opponent with precision energy projection that incapacitated without permanent damage. Particularly when operational parameters suggest deliberate destabilization rather than research objectives. The central apparatus emitted high-pitched mechanical protest as the progenitor completed systematic neutralization. harmonic frequencies dissipating through controlled pathways rather than catastrophic collapse. Reality stabilized around them, spatial distortions gradually returning to normal parameters as manipulation energies dispersed. Operation neutralized, he announced calmly, stepping away from the deactivated device. Though secondary monitoring suggests similar operations in progress at alternative locations. Part of coordinated implementation strategy rather than isolated research initiative. Lord Faustus displayed surprising composure despite operational failure, his aristocratic features settling into calculated assessment rather than continued rage. Temporary setback, he stated with cold certainty. The ascension proceeds according to established timeline regardless of individual node neutralization. Timeline established by whom? Lilith demanded, securing neutralized security personnel with specialized restraints designed to prevent supernatural energy channeling. Under whose authority does your faction operate? These operations violate multiple supernatural accords established after the Great War. Authority transcending obsolete factional limitations, Faustus replied cryptically. The Convergence Council recognizes necessity beyond political considerations. Ascension parameters proceed regardless of isolated interference. The Convergence Council. The designation triggered recognition in Cowrie's diplomatic archives, obscure references in classified Grigori intelligence regarding suspected devil faction operating beyond conventional hierarchical structures. Rumors rather than confirmed entity, specialized interest group pursuing transcendent methodologies outside established aristocratic authorization. Unauthorized operations employing restricted methodologies. She assessed, diplomatic training providing conceptual framework despite limited intelligence. Rogue faction rather than sanctioned devil hierarchy initiative. Visionaries rather than rogues, corrected Faustus with unsettling conviction. The boundaries established after the Great War represent artificial limitations preventing natural evolutionary progression. Our methodologies merely accelerate inevitable transcendence. The progenitor observed this exchange with ancient patience, crimson eyes reflecting understanding beyond present circumstances. The methodologies remain consistent despite technological evolution, he noted with clinical detachment. Sacred gear extraction, barrier manipulation, convergence theory application, unchanged core principle. Plus across a millennium of implementation attempts. Refined and perfected, Faustus confirmed with disturbing pride. Your unexpected transformation provided valuable data regarding adaptation potential. Though absorption rather than manifestation represents optimal outcome under current parameters. The casual reference to the progenitor's traumatic origin carried deliberate provocation. Attempting to trigger emotional response that might disrupt tactical cohesion. The ancient vampire's expression remained entirely unchanged, millennia of existence apparently providing immunity against such psychological manipulation. Fascinating perspective, he replied conversationally. Though historical evidence suggests approximately 7 previous implementation attempts resulted in catastrophic failure rather than anticipated transcendence. The current methodology appears unlikely to overcome fundamental conceptual limitations despite technological enhancements. Embassy Security. Wise Systems had finally processed the unauthorized intrusion and operational disruption, general alarm protocols activating throughout the complex. Distant supernatural energy signatures indicated RESPO. NSE teams approaching their position, significantly larger security force than the neutralized perimeter personnel. Extraction required. Lilith assessed professionally. Primary evidence secured Hero operational disruption and witness confirmation. Continued engagement presents unnecessary risk without proportional intelligence gain. Kaori concurred with tactical assessment, diplomatic considerations temporarily yielding to practical necessity. Maintenance access provides optimal extraction route connecting to sublevel transition points. 70% probability of interception. Before reaching external egress positions. Unnecessary complexity, the progenitor observed mildly. Shadow transit offers more efficient extraction methodology given current circumstances. Without waiting for response, he extended his influence throughout the chamber, darkness deepening with impossible density as his unique vampiric abilities manipulated fundamental properties of shadow itself. The effect expanded outward from his position, encompassing both Lilith and Kaori within its influence radius while excluding devil personnel. This will feel somewhat disorienting for first-time transit, he informed them conversationally. Recommend maintaining cognitive focus on physical self-perception to minimize transition effects. Before either could respond, reality itself say. Emed to fold around them, physical matter temporarily converting to shadow essence as the progenitor extended his unique transportation ability to include both allies. The sensation defied conventional description, moving through dimensional layers without standard transition protocols, bypassing established pathways through method unique to the ancient vampire's evolved abilities. The shadow NSIT lasted precisely 3.2 seconds before reality reasserted itself around them. They materialized in Cowrie's diplomatic facility conference room, exactly where their planning session had occurred before embassy infiltration. The secured environment recognizing authorized energy signatures despite unconventional arrival methodology. Kaori required momentary equilibrium adjustment, her hybrid physiology processing the unusual transportation method with minor discomfort rather than significant disruption. Lilith appeared similarly affected, professional composure maintained despite evident sensory disorientation. Efficient, the hunter acknowledged with professional appreciation. Though advance notification regarding methodology would have been tactically appropriate, circumstances suggested prioritizing extraction expediency over procedural communication, the progenitor replied reasonably. Embassy security protocols would have established comprehensive containment parameters. Within approximately 47 seconds of alarm activation, Kaori folded her wings through controlled manifestation, supernatural aspects reintegrating with physical form as she processed rational outcomes against diplomatic ramifications. The infiltration and disruption of Devil sovereign territory would generate significant political consequences regardless of justification validity. The Convergence Council, she focused on critical intelligence gained despite operational complications. Classified Grigori archives contain limited references, suspected Devil faction operating beyond conventional hierarchical authorization, specializing in transcendence methodologies and barrier manipulation research. Hunter archives similarly reference suspected unauthorized faction within Devil aristocracy. Lilith confirmed, activating secure communication protocols to establish connection with council leadership. Though without specific designation or confirmed membership identification, they've operated under various designations throughout historical periods, the progenitor added, apparently unaffected by the shadow transit he had initiated. Organizational structure re-evolves while methodological objectives remain consistent, transcendence through sacred gear accumulation and barrier manipulation toward dimensional convergence. Kaori activated her diplomatic archive access, requesting specific intelligence regarding designated faction while establishing secure connection with Grigori leadership. Lord Barakiel requires immediate briefing given operational development and diplomatic ramifications. The embassy infiltration constitutes significant protocol violation regardless of justification validity. Barrier collapse would have constituted considerably greater diplomatic incident. Lilith observed practically. Evidence secured during operation confirms systematic manipulation beyond isolated research initiative. The coordination pattern suggests imminent implementation phase rather than preliminary experimentation. The progenitor moved toward conference table, where the hunter's evidence projection device remained from their earlier planning session. With precise gesture, he activated additional data visualization displaying chronological pattern analysis across multiple operational locations. The frequency and intensity of manipulation operations has increased significantly over the past 3 weeks, he explained, highlighting specific data points within the projection, suggesting approaching convergence threshold rather than independent research objectives. Quote, the pattern became disturbingly apparent through visual representation, systematic operations targeting specific junction points within the dimensional boundary network, creating calculated weakening pattern that would allow precisely controlled barrier reconfiguration rather than catastrophic collapse. They're establishing specialized transit network, Kaori realized. Diplomatic training yielding to supernatural physics understanding. Not destroying barriers but selectively modifying permeability parameters to allow directed access between previously isolated realms. Correct, confirmed the progenitor. The methodology creates precision instruments rather than demolition charges, surgical alteration of existing boundary structures with a triggering general collapse that would attract immediate factional response. Lilith expanded the projection to display global distribution pattern. 17 confirmed operations across 9 countries, each targeting specific junction point within the boundary network. The distribution creates deliberate weakening pattern focused toward central convergence location. Japan, the ancient vampire identified, indicating specific geographical coordinates within the projection. Kuo Town specifically, the original initialization point from 1 millennium ago, selected for symbolic significance rather than tactical advantage. Quote, the location triggered recognition in Kaori's diplomatic intelligence archives, unremarkable Japanese municipality from human perspective but significant sup. Natural convergence point where multiple faction territories established overlapping claims through historical precedent rather than formal territorial agreements. Neutral zone under multinational supernatural administration. She confirmed from diplomatic knowledge. No single faction maintains sovereign authority, creating jurisdictional ambiguity that complicates unified response capabilities. Perfect staging ground for operations requiring minimal interference, Lilith concluded, Hunter tactical assessment aligning with diplomatic understanding. The boundary convergence creates natural amplification effect for manipulation methodologies while jurisdictional limitations prevent coordinated opposition. The progenitor nodded slightly, confirming their analysis while adding historical context. The location served similar function during previous implementation attempt 1 millennium ago. Symbolic significance enhances methodological effectiveness through established precedent rather than merely practical considerations. His reference to personal historical connection remained deliberately understated, professional detachment maintained despite evident traumatic associations with the identified location and methodologies. This controlled emotional distance despite personal involvement impressed Kaori from diplomatic perspective, suggesting psychological evolution beyond conventional supernatural development patterns. Her communication bracelet activated, incoming transmission indicator displaying Lord Barakiel's personal identifier. The timing suggests De Grigori monitoring systems had already detected the embassy incident, diplomatic leadership requiring immediate explanation regarding unauthorized intervention. Diplomatic consequences notwithstanding, verification requirements have been satisfied, she stated, professional assessment focusing on practical implications rather than political ramifications. The barrier manipulation operations represent existential threat requiring immediate multinational response regardless of factional politics. Hunter Council leadership has authorized emergency protocol implementation, Lilith confirmed. Reviewing incoming secure transmission. Global response coordination initiating with priority classification Omega-7. Reality structure threat requiring immediate multilateral action. Quote, the Convergence Council will have anticipated conventional response protocols, noted the progenitor with the calm certainty of someone who had witnessed similar patterns across centuries. Their operational timeline includes contingency parameters for inevitable discovery and opposition. The implementation acceleration suggests approaching culmination point rather than preliminary phase. Core, I faced uncomfortable diplomatic reality, her career likely sacrificed through protocol violation, yet potentially preventing catastrophic barrier manipulation that threatened fundamental reality stability. Political consequences seemed increasingly irrelevant against existential threat assessment. I'll brief Lord Barakiel directly, she decided, accepting incoming communication while maintaining secure conference room isolation. The evidence secured during operation provides sufficient verification for emergency response authorization regardless of procedural violations. Recommended approach, agreed Lilith. Hunter pragmatism prioritizing effective threat response over procedural compliance. Council resources are mobilizing toward identified operation locations, though coverage remains insufficient given global distribution pattern. Prioritize Kuo Town convergence point, the progenitor suggested, indicating specific coordinates within the projection. Operational pattern suggests peripheral manipulations prepare conditions for central implementation rather than functioning as independent objectives. Neutralizing the convergence location would disrupt the entire methodology regardless of peripheral completion status. His tactical assessment aligned with pattern analysis displayed within the projection, systematic operations establishing preconditions for central implementation rather than representing individual objectives. The strategic approach suggested prioritizing convergence point neutralization over attempting comprehensive response across global distribution. Lord Barakiel will require direct evidence presentation, Kaori noted, preparing diplomatic briefing materials while awaiting connection establishment. Particularly given political ramifications of embassy infiltration and potential faction conflict implications. The operational disruption provided necessary verification, Lilith observed practically. Devil faction conduct. Unauthorized barrier manipulation employing restricted methodologies represents clear violation of post-war accords regardless of jurisdictional considerations. The Convergence Council operate beyond conventional hierarchical authorization, the Progenitor reminded them, Crimson Eyes studying the projected operation pattern with ancient patience. Standard diplomatic approaches may prove inadequate given their demonstrated willingness to violate established accords. Kaori's communication bracelet signaled connection establishment, Lord Barakiel's distinctive energy signature Mani. Festing through specialized projection system. The fallen angel leader's expression conveyed controlled fury beneath aristocratic composure, diplomatic protocol violation apparently reported through multiple channels before her explanation opportunity. Diplomat Tenjiao, he greeted with formal coldness that indicated severe professional consequences pending. Perhaps you might explain why Grigor I representation has violated Devil sovereign territory through unauthorized combat manifestation, potentially triggering faction conflict during already heightened tension conditions. Evidence S. ECU read during necessary intervention confirms systematic barrier manipulation operations targeting dimensional junction points, she replied, formal diplomatic syntax balanced against urgency requirements. Devil faction designated Convergence Council, conducting unauthorized operations employing restricted methodologies with potential catastrophic boundary destabilization consequences. She transmitted secured evidence package through established diplomatic channels, operational recordings, energy signature analysis, barrier manipulation verification data. The comprehensive documentation provided irrefutable confirmation regarding unauthorized Devil faction activities regardless of her procedural violations. Lord Barakiel reviewed transmitted evidence with remarkable efficiency, 12 millennia of existence providing analytical capabilities beyond conventional supernatural assessment. His expression shifted from diplomatic fury to genuine concern as verification protocols confirmed authenticity despite unconventional acquisition methodology. These manipulation patterns, he observed with growing alarm, they're establishing directed permeability corridors rather than general destabilization. Precision methodology suggesting specific target objectives beyond simple boundary violation. Assessment confirmed through direct observation, Kaori agreed, professional relief evident as diplomatic leadership recognized threat validity despite procedural objections. The operational pattern suggests imminent implementation phase targeting central convergence point in Kuo Town, Japan. You've verified this through direct intervention, Barakiel stated rather than questioned, millennia of leadership experience recognizing necessary protocol violations under certain circumstances. With hunter coordination and additional consultant expertise. His careful phrasing acknowledged the progenitor's presence without specifically identifying the ancient Vampi. Diplomatic caution regarding communication security rather than information limitation. Fallen angel leadership maintained extensive historical archives regarding significant supernatural entities. Barakiel undoubtedly recognizing the unique energy signature despite the being's millennia of deliberate isolation. Verification required direct observation given manipulation sophistication, Kaori confirmed. Accepting professional responsibility while maintaining operational justification. Standard diplomatic channels proved inadequate when confronting existential threat potential. Akiel studied the transmitted evidence with increasing concern, focusing particularly on chronological acceleration pattern and convergence point identification. The implementation timeline suggests approaching culmination threshold. Weeks rather than months or years before central operation activation. Assessment consistent with observed acceleration pattern, she agreed, relief evident as. Diplomatic leadership prioritized threat response over procedural violation consequences. Recommend emergency protocol implementation regardless of factional political considerations. The fallen angel leader considered briefly before reaching decision with characteristic efficiency. Emergency protocols authorized under Celestial Preservation Directive. You'll proceed directly to convergence location with current operational team. Establishing advanced position pending reinforcement deployment. The authorization referencing ancient protocol established during reality stabilization following the Great War, represented highest possible response classification within Grigori hierarchy. Political consequences became entirely secondary to existential threat containment under such directive implementation. Understood. Kaori acknowledged, formal diplomatic syntax reflecting authorization gravity. Proceeding to convergence location with established operational parameters. Multi-NA. Chional coordination recommended given threat classification and jurisdictional considerations. Already initiated through secured channels, Barakiel confirmed, millennia of leadership experience. Evident in rapid response implementation. Though faction cooperation remains uncertain given current political tension conditions. Proceed with caution regarding potential conflict escalation during response operations. The communication concluded with formal closing protocols, Lord Barakiel's projected presence dissolving as connection terminated. Kaori turned toward her unusual allies, Professor. Echelonal assessment balancing diplomatic concerns against practical operational requirements. Emergency authorization granted under Celestial Preservation Directive, she informed them, unnecessary. Why given their obvious monitoring of the exchange yet diplomatically appropriate as formal notification. Proceeding directly to convergence location with current operational team configuration. Under Council has issued parallel authorization under Reality Preservation Protocol, Lilith confirmed, reviewing secure communication from leadership channels. Global resources mobilizing toward identified operation locations with priority emphasis on convergence point neutralization. The Progenitor observed their respective organizational responses with analytical detachment, Crimson Eyes are reflecting ancient patience beyond conventional supernatural perspective. The Convergence Council will have anticipated multinational response once operational discovery became inevitable, he noted reasonably. Their implementation timeline includes contingency parameters for opposition interruption attempts, suggesting accelerated schedule rather than operational abandonment, Kaori translated. Diplomatic assessment focusing on tactical implications. They'll proceed regardless of discovery, possibly prioritizing central implementation over peripheral completion. Consistent with historical precedent regarding similar operations, he agreed, the casual reference to millennium-spanning observation period reminding both allies regarding his unique temporal perspective. Previous MP lamentation attempts maintained operational momentum despite opposition intervention, adapting methodologies rather than abandoning objective parameters. Lilith expanded tactical projection, playing Kuo town geographical configuration with supernatural territory overlay indicating factional jurisdiction claims. The convergence point falls within overlapping territorial assertions without clear sovereign authority, creating response coordination complications despite multinational authorization. Tactical advantage rather than coincidental selection, Kaori observed, diplomatic experience providing relevant context. Jurisdictional ambiguity prevents unified response protocol implementation without extensive multinational negotiation typically requiring timeframes exceeding operational window parameters, necessitating independent intervention pending formal coordination establishment, the hunter concluded practically. Current operational team representing initial response capability until reinforcement deployment through official channels. The Progenitor studied the projected location with unreadable expression, Crimson Eyes revealing nothing regarding EVID. Personal connection to the identified convergence point. His millennia of existence provided emotional control beyond conventional supernatural capabilities, psychological reactions concealed bene. Perfect composure regardless of traumatic associations. The location maintains specialized significance beyond practical considerations, he stated finally, each word precisely measured despite evident personal implications. Symbolic resonance enhances methodological effectiveness through established precedent, creating operational amplification effect transcending purely technical parameters. His controlled reference to personal history, the location where his human existence had ended and vampiric transformation begun, impressed Kaori from diplomatic perspective. Such emotional discipline suggested psychological evolution beyond conventional supernatural development patterns, priorities entirely focused on practical threat response rather than personal vendetta despite evident justification. Operational planning requires immediate implementation given acceleration indicators, she decided, diplomatic considerations yielding to practical necessity. Transportation logis. Ticks suggest expedited deployment methodology rather than conventional travel protocols. Shadow transit provides optimal efficiency regarding deployment timeline, the progenitor offered conversationally. The casual suggestion belying its unprecedented nature. No recorded vampire entity had demonstrated dimensional transportation capabilities extending to multiple passengers across international distances. Lilith appeared momentarily skeptical despite having experienced shorter-range demonstration during embassy extraction. Across Pacific distances with multiple transit subjects. That exceeds conventional supernatural transportation parameters regardless of classification status. Conventional parameters prove inadequate descriptors regarding certain evolved capabilities, he replied with faint amusement. Apparently accustomed to skepticism regarding his unique abilities. Shadow manipulation allows dimensional shortcutting rather than linear transit, utilizing fundamental properties transcending standard spatial limitations. Kaori assessed practical considerations against tactical requirements. Conventional transportation would require minimum 12 hours regardless of diplomatic resource utilization. Shadow transit, if functionally viable across suggested distances, would provide immediate deployment capability, critical advantage given identified threat acceleration. Demonstration parameters suggest viable methodology, she decided, diplomatic caution balanced against practical necessity. Though medical monitoring recommended given unknown physiology. Cal effects on non-vampire subjects during extended transit operations. Reasonable precaution, the ancient vampire acknowledged, apparent centuries of existence providing mature perspective Riga. RDING legitimate operational concerns rather than wounded pride at capability questioning. Though historical precedent suggests minimal adaptation requirements for supernatural entities with established energy control disciplines. Preparation proceeded with methodical efficiency, necessary equipment secured, communication protocols established, contingency parameters defined through collaborative tactical assessment. The operational planning reflected complementary expertise integration, diplomatic, hunter, and progenitor perspectives creating comprehensive approach exceeding individual capability parameters. Transit preparation complete, Kaori reported as final equipment checks concluded. Proceeding to convergence location with established operational configuration pending reinfo. Cement deployment through official channels. Lilith secured specialized hunter equipment with professional thoroughness. Shadow transit remains experimental methodology regarding extended distance parameters. Physiological monitoring protocols active throughout transition process. The progenitor observed their preparations with patient certainty, crimson eyes reflecting millennia of accumulated experience beyond conventional supernatural perspective. When preparations concluded, he simply extended hands toward both allies, the formal gesture reminiscent of ancient court etiquette rather than modern tactical operations. Physical contact establishes transit envelope parameters, he explained as they accepted the offered connection. Recommend maintaining cognitive focus on Cal self-perception throughout transition process. The experience differs significantly from conventional supernatural transportation methodologies. As they established physical contact, darkness gathered around their position, not merely absence of light but fundamental shadow essence responding to the ancient vampire's unique abilities. The darkness deepened with impossible density, reality TSELF seeming to fold inward as his evolved powers manipulated dimensional properties beyond conventional supernatural capabilities. Transit initiating, he stated conversationally, as if discussing minor weather observation rather than unprecedented dimensional manipulation. Approximate duration 17 seconds given destination parameters and passenger configuration. Reality dissolved. Around them, physical matter temporarily converting to shadow essence as the progenitor extended his unique transportation ability across international distances. The sensation transcended conventional description, moving through dimensional layers without standard transition protocols, bypassing established pathways through methodology unique to the ancient vampire's evolved abilities. 70 seconds of existence beyond conventional reality parameters. 17 seconds witnessing fundamental universe structures from perspective impossible through standard perception frameworks. 70 seconds experiencing the shadow essence that connected all points across conventional spatial limitations. Then reality reasserted itself around their position. They materialized in dense forest clearing. midnight illumination filtering through ancient trees surrounding their arrival location. The air carried distinct atmospheric composition, Japanese coastal forest rather than European urban environment. Confirmation regarding successful international transit despite unprecedented methodology. Kaori required momentary equilibrium adjustment, hybrid physiology processing the unusual transportation method with moderate discomfort rather than significant disruption. Lilith appeared similarly affected. Professional composure maintained despite evident sensory disorientation requiring several seconds normalization. Arrival confirmed, the progenitor stated unnecessarily, releasing physical contact as shadow essence dissipated around their position. Approximately 3.7 km northeast from identified convergence coordinates. Sufficient distance for preliminary assessment without detection probability. Kaori extended supernatural senses, confirming geographical posit. Ion through environmental analysis and astronomical orientation. They had arrived precisely as intended, outskirts of Kuo Town, Japan, within optimal tactical approach distance to the identified Argent's location while maintaining sufficient separation for secure preliminary assessment. Successful transit methodology demonstration, she acknowledged, professional appreciation despite lingering physiological adaptation requirements. Though implementation parameters suggest unique capability profile rather than replicable transportation protocol. Certain evolved abilities remain individually specific rather than classification standard, he agreed with mild amusement, apparently accustomed to analytical assessment regarding his unique capabilities. The methodology developed through necessity rather than deliberate adaptation during early transformation centuries. Lilith activated specialized hunter equipment, surveillance systems combining technological sophistication with supernatural enhancement methodologies. The devices established perimeter monitoring while gathering preliminary intelligence regarding convergence location energy signatures and operational activity indicators. Dimensional frequency oscillation detected at convergence coordinates, she reported, reviewing incoming data with professional efficiency. Signature pattern matches observed manipulation operations though significantly higher amplitude registration. Established activity rather than implementation preparation. They've already initiated preliminary convergence phase, Kaori translated. Diplomatic experience with supernatural physics providing relevant context. Consistent with accelerated timeline indicators observed during embassy operation. The implementation schedule advances ahead of projected parameters. Quote, the progenitor surveyed surrounding forest with analytical precision, crimson eyes perceiving details beyond conventional supernatural capabilities. The Acacian maintains minimal alterations since previous visitation, he observed with academic detachment that belied evident personal connection. Though energy signature patterns suggest significant or ground development beneath original academy structures. His casual reference to previous visitation emphasized the location's personal significance, where his human existence had ended in vampiric transformation begun 1 millennium earlier. Yet his emotional discipline remained absolute, priorities entirely focused on practical threat assessment rather than psychological reaction despite traumatic associations. Preliminary tactical approach requires comprehensive intelligence gathering before direct engagement, Lilith determined, hunter methodology prioritizing information acquisition before operational implementation. The convergence operation appears significantly more advanced than peripheral manipulation activities observed in European locations. Suggesting deliberate misdirection regarding implementation timeline, Kaori agreed, diplomatic experience with supernatural negotiation providing relevant context. The peripheral operations created impression of preliminary phase while central implementation proceeded concurrently rather than sequentially. Consistent with Convergence Council methodologies observed across historical periods, the progenitor confirmed millennia of existence providing pattern recognition beyond conventional analytical frameworks. Operational compartmentalization with deliberate information limitation regarding central objective parameters. Standard procedure dating to original implementation attempt 1 millennium ago. They proceeded through dense forest toward identified convergence coordinates, movement carefully calibrated to minimize detection probability while maintaining optimal approach efficiency. The night surrounding them carried distinctive Japanese atmospheric characteristics, specific humidity composition, botanical fragrance combinations, and ambient sound patterns unique to the geographical location. For Kaori, the environment represented return to cultural origin despite her international diplomatic career. For Lilith, tactical assessment of unfamiliar operational territory requiring adaptation from European hunting methodologies. For the Progenitor, something far more significant, Ritu. RN to transformation origin location after millennium of deliberate separation. Yet all three focused entirely on immediate threat response rather than personal considerations, complementary expert. Eyes creating operational synergy that transcended individual capability parameters. Diplomatic, hunter, and progenitor perspectives provided comprehensive assessment framework exceeding conventional supernatural response protocols.